Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to doing what if Krillin was reincarnated. Also, if you like my videos, make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell, and make sure you have it on all. With that out of the way, let's begin. Chapter 17. Fodder move, villains and fun. The ship was extremely fast as it made its way towards the Super Dragon Ball. The galaxy outside was beautiful, stars were shining everywhere, and planets could be seen fastly disappearing and appearing as the ship made its way within the cold space. After a few hours of traveling, I finally arrived at the Super Dragon Ball's location. It looked like a dead planet. It just was covered by a layer of space dust. I looked towards it, and I suddenly realized that I wasn't strong enough to get it. It was too big. I also remembered I couldn't use it as well. It required the language of the gods or something, just like Namek's Dragon Balls required Namekian language. I sighed. I couldn't gather all of them anyway. I didn't know how to breach the barrier between universes, and I'm not sure if Champa Vados would notice if I entered Universe 6 either. The Super Dragon Balls could be collected later. I wasn't in a rush to wish on them anyway. I already had everything that I wanted and more. I decided to let the ship wander among the galaxy while I trained under the high gravity combined with my gravity field and weighted clothes. My power was increasing every day. I didn't forget to continue training my techniques and their combinations. All of my current power multiplying techniques were Keikin up to 50 times multiplier, Benevolent Buddha stand 10 times increase in its weakest form, 15 times at its strongest, Super Mode 64 times increase, Full Power Technique 1.5 increase, Godspeed 2 times increase. I also learned some foreign alien techniques, but I didn't have the required physique to use them, while the strongest couldn't even rival my Buddha technique. The combination of my techniques brought a qualitative change towards me, so I didn't need to learn any more than these. I didn't care about most of the techniques, but some could be used by my friends on Earth. There was a special Saiyan technique that Goku could use before he learned to go Super Saiyan, the Fake Moon technique. There was also a mantra which could help him learn to control himself in the form. There was a technique for Jin's 3-eyed race as well. It was a 5 times increase in power level. Unfortunately, besides the Keikin, the humans couldn't learn other techniques, while the Keikin wouldn't be pushed beyond 20 times in their hands, as that was the limit of a normal body. Saiyan or not, I could combine some techniques like the Keikin and the full power technique, Keikin and Godspeed, etc. I could even combine the Keikin full power technique and Godspeed all together, but more than that, and my body would give out, unable to handle the stress. And I'm not talking about normal Keikin, I'm talking about it at 50 times its maximum. It would take me a while, but I could combine all of them with the Benevolent Buddha stand as well. It might take whole tens of years before I fused every technique into the Supreme Mode though. But there was no need for such an overpowered mode till Beerus came. Speaking of Beerus, I hope my constant use of the Dragon Balls didn't hurt the balance of the universe. Well, it was unlikely. What Porguna told me put me on thoughts. Hopefully he will sleep the same amount of time, so I could prepare myself thoroughly. As my spaceship wandered around space, my communicator suddenly started to beep. It was an emergency signal from a nearby planet. On the screen appeared a bug humanoid with big fly's eyes. He looked at me with what I could only interpret as an imploring gaze as he started to talk in common tongue. "Oh, please help our planet, traveler. We are besieged by a bunch of space mercenaries, and they want to suck our planet resources dry. Quite literally, they have a type of tree that sucks the energy of the planet." His explanation was cut short as 2 blue midgets appeared before him and snapped his neck. They had huge bulbous heads, and they destroyed their communicator. The midgets were kind of foreign to me. I wasn't sure of who they were. I didn't care either. I could use instant transmission relatively well now, and the spaceship wasn't truly needed for me to breathe in space. My body could adapt to outer space due to its healing factor and Kai strengthening, making me able to easily hold out on the void. My body would automatically conserve oxygen, that it would reuse every time I was in an unhospitable environment. I could also use Kai to make a barrier around me which would extend the time I could stay in outer space. I also didn't need as much oxygen as normal humans to survive after the exposure to space. In time, just like Frieza, I would not need oxygen to survive in space at all. I got out of the spaceship and put it in its capsule mode. I put into my chest pocket and put 2 fingers on my forehead and started concentrating. The planet the signal came from was nearby, and I could sense the power levels there. The highest was at 23,000, while the others were lower, below 10,000. I immediately used a special magic technique to make myself invisible and teleported towards the highest power level. Surprisingly, it was a Saiyan who looked just like Goku, hairstyle, face and all. He was standing on a giant tree which was endlessly growing into the red sky. The earth below was cracked, buildings stood in ruin. But people everywhere dead. Some of his subordinates were even eating the bodies and chuckling, saying that it tasted like space chicken. From their words, I heard that the name of the Saiyan was Turles. I didn't know if he was one of Goku's relatives or not, but I didn't care about that. Goku wouldn't care about him since he was evil. I immediately appeared behind him and thrust a Kai blade straightly in his heart and bifurcated him in 2. The cronies were immediately scared shitless, but I obliterated all of them with mini lightning infused Kamehameha. They were all weaklings. Unfortunately for the planet, I came too late. It couldn't be saved. It was thoroughly drained of its core's energy, and it would die soon. It also seemed that most if not all of the bug people were exterminated. It was a pity, since I came too late, but nothing could be done. I observed the tree and saw how it used its roots to drain energy from the depleted core of the planet. Suddenly a fruit appeared on its branch. It was extremely big, and it looked quite juicy. I think I shouldn't waste it since the planet was doomed anyway. I grabbed the fruit and took a big bite out of it, and finished it in one gulp. I could feel endless energy explode inside my body as my power level jumped to 1,500,000. This was the combination of the fruit and my prior training for almost 6 months. There was still half a year before the next Budokai Tenkaichi tournament will start, so I still had quite a lot of time to adventure myself in the galaxy. There would also be 4 years after that to adventure even more before Raditz came to Earth. The planet was on its last legs. I didn't like the tree as it was feasting on planet's life energy. Even though I ate its fruit, I wouldn't use it for myself. If I destroyed planets willy-nilly, Beerus would go bonkers. Frieza could destroy planets from time to time, because he got the okay from Beerus. From planet Vegeta till Namek, Frieza never destroyed planets with high life force. Planets with high life force increase the universe's mortal level. And the best nourishment for this tree were planets with high life force. Thus if Beerus ever found it, he would destroy it with whoever used it. I got out of the planet's stratosphere and made my way out to the starry field of space. I clenched my hands and put them around my body, my palms facing upwards. With all of the techniques of the universe learned, I knew the Gallic gun. Vegeta's attack, so I used it to exterminate this dead planet, since it was useless to let it remain here anyway. There was a 0 chance for it to make a comeback, since the core of the planet was destroyed. Destroying the planet would destroy the tree as well. 2 problems solved in one shot. I charged the Kai into my palms as a purple aura started to gather around me, and I shot it directly into the core of the planet. It was already drained, so it exploded, and everything from the planet became space dust. I already scanned the planet thoroughly before I made this decision. The space pirates were bloodthirsty and had scouters, so they killed truly everyone, leaving no survivors. The universe was cruel, where the strong reigned supreme. As the Cult clan was the strongest, they pretty much controlled the whole universe. There was the Galactic Patrol, but they were a bunch of weaklings who could only go after second-hand villains. They didn't even have a force as strong as the Ginyu Force. I popped the ship out of its capsule form and continued my wandering around the universe while training. As the ship wandered, and I trained, time was just flying. With the infinite food I had in the ship, there were no problems for me. Loneliness wasn't even a concept I grasped anymore, as my mind and soul attained a strength that not many people would have. I could control my emotions perfectly, and I attained a perfect martial mind, enhancing my training speed. By the time the Budokai Tenkaichi came, I already reached a power level of 2,100,000. The higher the power level, the faster it increased. Well, if you didn't encounter a bottleneck. But with my body having its unlimited healing and my mind being extremely strong, there was no such thing as limits for me. I could train and train, and my power level will increase continuously. I didn't have a limiter wall yet like Goku would have in the future, the wall which he would break in Super to attain Ultra Instinct. I was passing by a nearby planet when I got out of the ship, and I was ready to use instant transmission to go back to Earth, but I suddenly noticed that the planet was encased in ice, and its vitality was slowly getting lower and lower. This wasn't a naturally icy planet, so I decided to explore it before I got back to Earth. Goku was already extremely strong by now. If my sensing of his power level was true, he breached 2000, becoming the strongest on Earth. I flew towards the planet and approached one of its more populated cities. Chaos was everywhere as armored grunts used their hand blasters to devastate the city. A giant ship was releasing a beam that was draining the planet of its warmth. I vaporized all of the grunts and took a better look around. The inhabitants of the planet were looking like humans, but they had pink skin and pointy ears like elves. They were also tended to look more handsome. They were all hiding around behind rubble that the grunts created. They started cheering when they saw me kill all of the grunts in one swift move. I smiled towards them and charged a Big Bang attack, another Vegeta technique. It wasn't hard to learn it. After learning so many techniques, it was easy to copy every technique of the main cast and villains. The Big Bang attack struck the ship squarely and exploded. Nothing remained out of it. I could swear I heard an old voice cough a curse out of it before it thoroughly exploded. Well, whatever, I guess. The villain was old, and with one foot in the grave, I just put him in the grave completely. The cheering of the inhabitants continued for a long while after the spaceship's explosion. Out of the rubble came a beautiful woman with red hair and the characteristics of the race. She had an angular face and a small nose. She was quite a beauty, if I said so myself. She bowed towards me and her voluptuous chest bounced. I averted my eyes, but I still snuck a peek before she got up. She started to speak in a soft tone of voice as she blushed. I'm the daughter of the leader of this planet, and I thank the great warrior for saving us from the evil Lord Slug's clutches. He has been draining our planet of vitality with his cult technology for years. If this continued for a few more years, the planet would have lost all its vitality, and it would become uninhabitable. I nodded towards her explanation as a burly middle-aged man with handsome features also came out of the rubble, and said in a modest tone of voice, while also bowing towards me, "I'm the leader of this planet, Great Warrior. Before you leave, I would like you to join us for a special feast our race holds for great heroes and warriors like yourself." There was still a day or so before the tournament started, so I decided to indulge in this guy's wishes. When I nodded towards him, he started to smile. While he nudged his daughter, she started blushing furiously. She was already red, so her skin started to take a hint of blue. I flew down and landed. The middle-aged man introduced himself and his daughter. "My name is Mutard, and my daughter is called Musarka. We hail from the Guardian family of the planet. As Guardians, we are also their leaders." I nodded my head towards his explanation and asked him, what was the deal with that slug guy? His gaze became frosty at the mention of the name Slug, and he answered. "He started to terrorize us some years ago as he heard our race has a fountain that restores the youth of a person for a certain amount of years. He wanted to take it all for himself. When we refused, and didn't tell him the location, he started to attack and terrorize us. He told us that he will destroy the planet slowly, and make his grunts and warriors destroy our cities till we collapsed and gave in to his demands. If it wasn't for you, Great Warrior, we might have gave in right now, as we couldn't handle this anymore. If I'm not rude, could Great Warrior tell me his name?" I responded casually, "Name's Krillin." He nodded his head at me like a chicken pecking rice, as he guided me towards one of the more intact and grander buildings. Somehow food was already prepared, as if a banquet table was prepared before they even knew I would come. He insisted on me taking the head chair, as he would be on my right, and his daughter on my left. She just continually blushed during the feast. There were also some other people invited at the feast. I could already hear outside the sound of machinery. It seemed they were ready to fix their cities and reconstruct. After the feast, Mutard insisted for me to take a night off and sleep at the residential room. I decided to humor him. I could instantly teleport towards Earth whenever I wanted. Some hour of normal sleep instead of meditating would be relaxing, even though I didn't need it physically or mentally. I stood on the bed as the door of the room suddenly opened. Musarka gently entered the room wearing nothing but a little bikini, her fair red skin showing almost everything. Her voluptuous chest couldn't be hidden at all by this small cloth. I widened my eyes as she made her way towards my bed. She was blushing extremely hard as her face was all but blue. I could sense her father waiting outside the door. I used my telekinesis to close and lock the door. When Mutard saw this, he immediately left. After a night of fun, I put on my clothes and checked that everything was where it was supposed to be. It was my first sexual experience in this life, and I could say that it was pretty enjoyable. Sarka was a virgin as well, and she didn't have any experience, but it felt good enough. She was sleeping on the bed, the sheets covering her fair body. I made sure to not impregnate her. I didn't want any children yet. I wasn't sure if Marin would even come into being. Maybe if 18 would ask for a child. I didn't like children much. She suddenly woke up and looked towards me. She was sure that I was going to leave as I was already dressed. She smiled towards me and said, "It was a fun night, Hero Krillin. I don't mind that you will leave. Our race has a very open mind concept about our bodily needs. You don't need to take responsibility if anything happens." I was pretty shy cause it was my first time, and my father insisted, saying that it would give us a good relationship in the future. I nodded my head towards her and said, "Whenever you would be in trouble, you can call me on this number." I handed her my spaceship communicator number, and I prepared myself to leave. She was pretty cute, but I didn't look for a long-standing relationship yet. It was just a little bit of fun between two consenting adults, nothing more. I put 2 fingers on my forehead and concentrated. It was time for the last tournament before Dragon Ball Z started. I would enjoy watching the fight between Piccolo and Goku. There was no reason for me to join as I was already too strong for them. And I didn't need the money prize either. I could just give some ideas to Bulma and patent them, like the Scouter, and patent it as my idea, getting at least 50% of the profit, maybe 65%, with my mind. I could already understand quite a bit of how this futuristic technology worked. I disappeared out of the bedroom and appeared on Earth on Papyrus Island. It seems I was early as not everyone was here. Chapter 18. Goku vs Piccolo and Imgon. As I stood around and waited for the others to make their way towards Papaya Island, I was accosted by a blonde woman wearing a skimpy skirt and a blouse that made her assets show themselves quite nicely. She had blue highlights in her hair and wore sandals on her feet. She started to talk to me, but I ignored her, and she left with a huff. I wasn't interested in her anyway. She looked a bit like a street worker ready to make a quick buck. Soon enough, Yamcha and Tien made their way towards the Rigi string place, and I waved towards them. They both looked at me with wide eyes, almost not recognizing me, as now I was standing at a 1 meter and 85 centimeters, fully grew up, 10 centimeters taller than Goku. After they registered, they asked me if I would participate in the tournament, but I shook my head and released a bit of my aura. They were both overwhelmed by it. Well, they were both stronger now. Tien standing at a power level of 1100 and Yamcha at a power level of 950. They couldn't even withstand a controlled burst of my power. After a while Jiaozu, Launch, Rashi, Pure, Oolong, and Bulma came as well. Rashi was the most impressive besides Goku. His power level reached 1300. Goku was still at the lookout, and he was preparing to make his way here. I chatted with all of them and I told them a few my space adventures. They all gasped or laughed at some of my tales. Bulma was looking at me with a blush on her face, and she seemed to be shy. Well, I did grow to be quite a bit more handsome than the original Krillin, and Bulma dug handsome men. But I wasn't interested in her. I knew her true personality, since she was younger, and I could say she was a manipulative woman who would do anything to get her hands on what she wants. She was also quite bitchy and irresponsible. But I couldn't deny she was a genius. When it came to tech, it was her only redeeming quality besides her above-average looks. Goku came a bit later, almost when the registered house closed. Piccolo was watching from a far turban and his original outfit on. He was glaring at me and Goku. It seemed Goku interacted with Piccolo when I was away. I could sense his power level. While Goku's was now at 2200, Piccolo's reached 1900. I talked with Goku, and it seemed, while I was away, Piccolo somehow got his hands on the Dragon Balls, and still wished for a turn of youth. He did so covertly, and when the Z fighters saw the dark sky and Shenron, the wish was already done. I guess I couldn't blame them. I didn't kill Pilaf and he still could make a Dragon Ball radar. I actually couldn't kill him. Well, he was dumb, and he had a penchant of trying. To rule the world he was quite innocent. From when he firstly fought he didn't truly try to kill. He was trying to incapacitate, and take his wish. Unfortunately for him, I knocked him out, and took the wish for myself. That was the only time he could have took his wish. We made our way inside the Tenkaichi arena. This year they made it, so even spectators could see the preliminaries from outside due to the huge demand. I levitated while being cross-legged, and waited for the preliminaries to start. The other spectators looked strangely at me, but after a while of staring they stopped, and looked towards the fighting arenas. I wasn't surprised by what I saw. Tien, Yamcha, Piccolo, and Goku made it to the finals. Mercenary Tao should have been here as well in his cyborg form, but I didn't see him. The finals would be Piccolo versus Yamcha and Goku versus Tien. The fights were interesting. Yamcha tried his best to fight Piccolo, but Piccolo just stretched his arms, grabbed him, and then broke his spine on his knee. It was quite brutal before Piccolo could do anything else to him. I intervened by pushing him away with a bit of invisible Kai. He staggered and looked towards me with fear in his eyes. I took Yamcha away from the stage, and fed him a senzu bean which Pure gave me. Yamcha got up and looked at Piccolo with uncontrollable fury in his eyes. I patted him on the back and imparted to him mentally a suited training technique and the Keikin. I even taught him how to create his stand based on his soul quality. He looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. I just nodded my head to him. Humans should stick together. Goku and Tien fought a bit more than Piccolo and Yamcha, but it still ended in Goku's victory, after both took their weighted clothes off. The power level difference was just too huge, and both their martial arts skills were pretty equal, but Goku being Goku improved all of his techniques in the middle of the fight and adapted. Piccolo narrowed his eyes at the display, unsure of himself if he could take Goku out thoroughly. He knew he was no match for me, so the best thing he could do was try to hurt my friends, but with me around, he knew there was no chance of that. The finals began, and it was quite a bloody fight. Even though there existed a power level difference between Goku and Piccolo, Piccolo had the innate advantage of recovering his injuries at the expense of Kai. The fight was long, and almost like in the anime, but with Goku coming out on top less injured, and the stage not being destroyed. Piccolo closed his eyes. There was no reason for him to live anymore. He was waiting for the final blow. Goku shouted towards Pure to throw him 2 senzu beans. Pure was confused at the number, but threw them to him anyways. Goku ate one and gave the other to Piccolo. Piccolo was quite stubborn, not wanting to take the bean, but Goku force-fed him it. Piccolo got up from the ground and glared at Goku. Goku just smiled and said, "It would be too bad if you died. The Dragon Balls would be gone, and I would have one less rival to fight against, don't you think?" Piccolo huffed and said, "Even without the Dragon Balls, who else could terrorize this planet with that freak over there watching over it?" He pointed towards me and I blushed inwardly. It seemed Piccolo lost all of his thoughts of world domination. I was just too strong, and he thought he might never catch up to me. It was kind of true actually. Goku just laughed at his words. I looked better at Goku, and he still had his tail. It seemed Kami decided against cutting it off this time for some reason. I nodded my head. I could still teach Goku the fake moon technique and the mantra to control his inner beast self. Maybe he could even improvise in Akari mode just like Broly. Goku was still a prodigy even though he wasn't on Broly's level of freakishness. After the world tournament ended, I could see Kai running into Goku's arms as they hugged each other. It seemed nothing deviated much of this couple's destiny. I walked towards Tien and imparted him the special 3-eyed clan technique, the Keikin, and the way to make a stand mentally. I did everything I could for them. Everything else was on their comprehension ability. A stand power would be based on the comprehensive power of the individual who created it. My stand could go up to 15 times power level, but it would be rare for others to breach 10 times. With their talent, I guess Tien could reach up to 8 times and Yamcha up to 6 times. I walked towards Goku and motioned towards him with my hand that I wanted to talk something with him. He came towards me, and I taught him the false moon technique and the controlling mantra. I even gave him a bit of say in history and the truth of his race. Goku's eyes glazed over as he realized he was the one who killed his grandpa and asked me, "Krillin, where do you know all of this?" I responded towards his question with a lie. During my travels in space I found out a bit about your race on the ruins of an ancient planet. It seems that your race is also extinct, and there were very few people like you out there. Goku nodded his head at the new information. He still wasn't over on how he killed his grandpa unknowingly, but suddenly his eyes started to give a determined aura, and he said, "Thanks for teaching me of my origins, Krillin. I will make sure I will never lose my control ever again, and train fully in the techniques that you gave me." I nodded my head. I didn't teach him the kicking, but I gave him the stand information as well. With his sane body he might master Kari faster instead of making a stand, and cut off the humongous body of the Azera down to size, so he wouldn't lose mobility or speed with the increase of 10 times power. Everyone was celebrating Goku's win at a new restaurant that just popped open near the tournament building. I looked around at the owner came at our table. I took a better look at him, and he had an afro and a mustache. He was wearing an apron and the uniform of the restaurant. It was Hercule the Fraud. It seemed he realized he wasn't cut for martial arts in this timeline, and decided to open up a restaurant here. He immediately started telling us how he admired martial artists, and how he wanted to become one himself, but realized he wasn't talented. He even wanted to give us the food we would consume on the house, but I stopped him. Even though he would have become a phony fraud in the future, there was no reason to destroy his new business now as he didn't do anything in this timeline. As any prize increased yet again this year to a 5 million amount, 1 million directly went to the bill. Kai looked with wide eyes at Goku's eating habits, and she started sweating, imagining how much food she would have to cook in the future. Things were pretty much done on Earth and 4 years of peace were rapidly approaching before Raditz would make his way here to disturb it. I was pretty much done with being on Earth for at least 4 more years. There was no reason to stay on the planet, as I already gave out all the needed training techniques to the core of the Z fighters. I even taught Xiaosu some ways to improve his mind and become a better psychic. His body type would never let him become a powerful martial artist, but he could become a very powerful physic as he had good talents for that. Piccolo knew he could do nothing anymore as well. Now in the future, maybe he would see the bright side of things and become a good guy, because if he remained a bad guy, he would be forever lonely, even though he was strong. During the earlier sagas, Piccolo liked to be a loner, but as he continued to advance in age he realized that being alone wasn't for him. He started to interact more with others and he even became Baby Pan's babysitter. You would see him everywhere he was needed. Piccolo had a soft heart under his tough look. Goku sparing him already gave him second thoughts on his path. Even though he got his father's memories, he wasn't his father. King Piccolo didn't truly reincarnate, he just infused his memories and a bit of his will on his progeny. I decided to talk with Bulma about the Scouters and she agreed to it after a bit of haggling. I gave her the required information which I improved upon, as I got my hands on some Scouters when I killed Turles. I even gave her some parts so she could find replacements for the materials that weren't on Earth. I didn't know where the materials were mined, so I couldn't make my way there to get the metals and required materials to create the Scouter. Fortunately, Bulma immediately listed off replacement materials that would work with my formula. It took her no more than a few hours to create the Scouter, and she clicked it while looking at me, and she gasped as the number on the screen appeared. Above 3 million krillin. She already scanned the other power level on the planet, and highest was Goku's. I just made an SSH motion with my finger and closed one eye while smiling mischievously. Most of them knew I was way stronger than them, but not by how much. It ignited their blood and fighting spirit if they knew there was always someone there stronger than them. It was even more effective if it was someone they knew and grew up personally with. It would make them never relax and give their all in their training. After we settled the price, and how we would share the money, I got 63%. I also opened a bank account, and told her just to dump my share in there. Unknowingly to me, the Scouters would change Earth's civilization bit after I came back from my 4 years trip in space. I prepared my trip and announced all of my friends again of my departure. They were sad that I had to leave as soon as I came back, but they understood me by now. They knew that I craved adventure, and that I already saw everything the Earth had to give. They all started to wave me goodbye in the front of Capsule Corporation's building as my spaceship blasted into the sky. I also gave Bulma some spaceship blueprints, and the gravity chamber idea. She should be able to make it with her father's help. Suddenly out of nowhere, an irritated voice came into my mind. "Human, who are you and why can you spread my patented technique around? I will sue you." It seemed King Kai realized I was spreading his technique without his approval. Maybe he was observing Earth when he felt the Kai fluctuations of Tien and Yamcha when they trained the Kakin. I decided to respond to him by directly teleporting to his planet. The blue humanoid man who wore a cap had sunglasses, and a gown with the symbol of North Kai on the front gasped, and fell on his butt at my sudden appearance and said with a gasp, "The Yardration spatial technique." I nodded my head. It seems North Kai knew his stuff as the guardian deity of the North Galaxy. He immediately got up and fixed his glasses and gown, and asked with a red face, "How did you learn my technique? I never showed it to anyone else." I described to him my wish using the Namekian Dragon Balls, and he nodded his head with a thoughtful look on his face. "So this wish of yours granted you knowledge of my technique?" I can't stop you from practicing and using it. Whatever, I will just take you as a student." King Kai immediately took me as a student in an attempt to save face, knowing he couldn't do anything to me as I was so strong. Since I was his student, he offered me his other technique, the Spirit Bomb. But I already showed him it, and he gasped and sweat trickled off his face as he said, "Haha, how silly of me, as you know all the techniques in the universe. It's obvious you would know the Spirit Bomb as well, haha." I asked him if he wanted anything else, and after that took my leave. I left a Kai imprint in my spaceship which I could teleport back to with my instant transmission. It was time for the next grand adventure in space. Maybe I could kill some more space pirates. I turned on the gravity at 300, and my gravity field at 3, pushing it to a full 900. I also wore weighted clothing, and my body plummeted towards the ground, but I immediately started to levitate while staying cross-legged, as my golden white aura started to encase me. Meditation combined with Kai training under the huge stress of gravity and weights would train all the possible aspects of the body and mind at the same time. My healing factor was working tirelessly at repairing my broken bones and torn muscles, strengthening my insides at the same time. My power level was continuously growing, 3,500,000, 604 million. I stopped at 4 million and decided that it was time to continue training my techniques. Unknowingly, 6 months had gone by during my gravity meditation session. While training my techniques, the communicator suddenly beeped as a hazy signal came from a nearby planet. It was full of static as an SOS message was sent. It was time to be a hero again, I guess. Chapter 19, Cooler is just cooler. On the communicator, on the display, appeared an old man, but the connection wasn't stable enough, so his words came out jumbled and incomplete. Flee. Hell, squad, kill. I couldn't understand much from the words alone, so I decided to investigate by scanning the planet with my Kai sense. And oh boy, was I in for a treat. There was a lower level of above 20 million on the planet, and it exuded an evil presence full of malice and greed. I used my magic to make myself invisible, and I hid my power level with my Kai control ability, and teleported myself directly near the action. A bunch of grunts were shooting Kai blasts all around the planet, which looked to be pretty advanced, as a blonde-haired man with blue skin wearing an armor inscribed with a symbol that I couldn't truly decipher stood on a building with his hands behind his back. He was flanked by a long-haired green man who wore the same type of armor and a helmet, and a tall brown reptilian man. All wore scouters on their face. I wasn't sure who they were, but I kept myself hidden and started to listen to their conversation as the blonde-haired man was talking in a heavy French accent. I wonder why Lord Cooler wants this planet. It's not like it would fetch a high price. We are wasting our time here. We aren't even needed. The normal soldiers could have conquered it all by themselves. He was the head of the trio, and the one with the power level above 20 million, the green-skinned man said. "Hey Salsa, we just don't have to do anything and get paid anyway. Why does it matter? Lord Cooler gives us easy jobs because we are his most trusted confidants. Well, there aren't any strong planets on his hit list that need us yet." The reptilian man nodded his head and continued. Yes, Thor is right. Free money and relaxation is very good. We just have to observe the planet conquering proceedings and get a hefty sum for our non-existent work. Isn't it great, Salsa? Salsa scoffed at the two men and said, "Darnies, I know you two are lazy pieces of trash, but unlike you, I crave some action from time to time. Lord Cooler didn't install me as the leader of the armored squadron for nothing. He wanted for me to do great things, but we already conquered most of the strong planets, and only the weaker ones remain in our West Galaxy. We can't go to the North one, as it's in the jurisdiction of Lord Cooler's brother, Lord Frieza." Dor and Ease nodded their heads at Salza's words, but they weren't truly interested. They wanted to laze around and get the rewards. All of them had their guards down. It was an extremely good time for an ambush. I decided to kill the two lieutenants first, and have a one-on-one with the captain. They were really near each other. Practically they stood side by side, so I didn't have to do much besides getting behind them. Salsa suddenly had a bad feeling, but before he could inform Dor and Ease, he saw how both of them were bifurcated in two as two golden Kai blades appeared inside their chests. Salsa cried out, "Dornies knew, you coward, show yourself." So I just did. My dots were already on 3 shining. At the same time my power level was increased by 8 times, so my power level was around 32 million. I toned my power level down a bit, and it reached 20 million. I wanted to train my techniques and skills against this guy. But before I could do anything, Salsa clicked his scouter and said, "Lord Cooler, we were ambushed on planet 683,921. Dor and Ease are dead. We require your presence here. The assailant is supposed stronger than me, and I might not survive here." Before he could continue, I shot his scouter with a purple beam from my finger. It was the Colt's family patented death beam. Cells paled, realizing I knew this technique, unsure of my origins. He shouted out loud, "What are your ties to the esteemed Colt family?" I just chuckled and said, "No ties, I'm just here to have some fun with you." Cells' already pale face turned from blue to white. He knew how Lord Cooler liked to play with his victims. He thought I was the same as him, and he didn't want to have the same fate. I created a wall around us with my magic, and as he tried to escape, he ran into it. He tried to slash it with a Kai blade. I raised an eyebrow at his attempts. Seems this guy's Kai control was pretty great, being even able to shape his Kai into forms. I threw myself at him with a Kai blade of my own, and we started fighting. He had a pretty good blade technique, and as our power level was pretty similar, he started to fight back. I parried his blade Kai, and threw a slash towards him, which he dodged, and retaliated with an overhead slash. I blocked it and I sank a bit in the cement that made up the building's roof. I threw him back with my strength, and tried to slash him in two from the waist, but he jumped and tried to fly. Forgetting about the box we were trapped in, he hit his head on it and plummeted down. Seeing him doing such a stupid mistakes, I cut off his head before he could do anything else, and vaporized his body with a tiny beam. I sighed. The fight was pretty interesting, but the guy wasn't particularly skilled in martial arts besides his Kai blade techniques. He was also flustered and scared as he knew my power was higher than his and he couldn't bring out his true strength. I didn't benefit much from this fight. I looked over as the grunts didn't know that I killed their leader, so I just vaporized all of them with my Kai. Unknowingly to me, it seemed I drifted out of the North Galaxy to the West Galaxy, while I trained intensively. I left the ship on wandering mode, so it never had a destination. Suddenly out of the void came a giant spaceship that was orange in color with white and black strips. A giant purple glass was in the middle of its being, and out of one of the hatches came out a purple reptilian-looking guy with a white headpiece and red eyes. He also had a blue gem-like protrusions on his knees and elbows. His power level was massive, almost 200 million in total. I felt suffocated. I could become stronger than him by 56 million if I turned on all my dots, but I didn't want to spoil the surprise for him. He looked at me with a cold look in his red eyes and said, "It seems Selza is dead. What kind of unique being are you?" Bolt had no nose. "What kind of race do you come from?" He asked himself ponderingly. I'm not sure if he could sense my Kai, but he didn't look agitated in the slightest. It was like he was taking a walk in the park, and he saw a cute dog he wanted to pet. He continued his thoughts. "Whatever Selza was good, but you are stronger, want to join me? I'm treating my subordinates pretty well." He shrugged his shoulders, and asked me nonchalantly. I shook my head and said, "We don't have the same kind of intentions when it comes to planets. I'm one who likes the original race to have their planet." Cooler looked disappointed and said, "Oh well, if that's what you think, then don't blame me for what I'm going to do now." He pointed his finger towards me as pink energy started to appear at the tip of it. He pointed it straight at my head, but immediately all of my 6 dots started glowing, and I appeared straightly behind him, and kicked him in the back. Cooler plummeted towards the planet and crashed in the buildings down below. I started to charge up a Gallic gun towards him as he started to get up the rubble as he growled, "Power multiplying techniques. I see those dots of yours increase your power level as they lighted upon your forehead. Whatever this isn't my full power." He started to charge up his aura as his power level increased to 300 million and he easily dismissed my Gallic gun. I immediately used my full power technique, and some strain appeared on my face. Even though I could use up to 3 combinations, it wasn't like I used them flawlessly with no drawbacks. Cooler's eyes widened when my power level exceeded his again, and I delivered a Kai enhanced punch towards his torso. He blocked it with both his arms, which he put in an X around his body. Both of them cracked and he grimaced. He was from Frieza's clan, so he should be able to transform once more. I couldn't let him. I could still use Godspeed, but I couldn't keep all of the techniques combined for a long time. But unfortunately, I wasn't fast enough. Cooler immediately started to grow taller as armor encased him. His face got covered by a spiky helmet, and he grew buffer as well. His power level rocketed to above 600 million, almost 700 million. He started to batter me like no tomorrow, but my healing factor could keep up. My bones would break, my internals would rupture, but they would heal seconds later. Cooler looked at me with a questioning gaze. His power level was way above mine, but he couldn't kill me with his punches. He decided to vaporize me directly afterward. He put his hand up as he charged a supernova above his head. I started to charge a final flash as I put my hands together, and started to charge up as yellow Kai appeared in them. Cooler sneered under his armored face, and said with a muffled voice, "You should know your limits, your power level is way below mine. Do you think you can do anything to me?" I smirked at his words as I activated Godspeed and my power level doubled. His eyes widened, but he already threw the supernova at me. I hit it head on with electrified final flash. My power level was already nearing 800 million, but Cooler immediately started to buff up, and his muscles started bulging. Veins appeared around his enlarged muscles. As he put all of his Kai inside the supernova, it started to overpower me and it was coming for me closer and closer. I couldn't push it back. His power level had gone above 1 billion, and it was still rising. It could destroy my body and make me weak for a while, but I gritted my teeth and said, "Cake in times 2. My power level skyrocketed, reaching above 1 billion and a half, and it pushed the supernova back. Krillin wasn't dumb enough to take it head on, and dodged it as it flew outside the atmosphere, and exploded in the cold void of space. Anger was all over Krill's face. If that hit him, he would have been injured quite severely. I panted down on the ground as my Kai was depleted and body injured. My healing factor worked to heal my body and internals, but it was really slow. The Kaiken technique put a high burden on the body combined with all of the other techniques. Kai isn't supposed to multiply that many times with no drawbacks. My body-based structure still wasn't strong enough to handle it. Krillin immediately appeared in front of me and grabbed my head as he started to run around and run me off buildings, just like the Og Broly did to Goku. I was too weak right now to stop me, and he seemed intent to torture me before he killed me. After he trashed me thoroughly with his body, he started to use his death beam and pierce me all over my body. I looked like a bee nest, but the holes were already starting to close. Krillin grunted as he started to get bored of playing with me. I didn't sound out a peep during the whole torture. Even though it hurt me, my mental fortitude helped me to endure everything. Krillin gathered another supernova and shot it at the planet. Lava started to boil down everywhere as he left. He thought I couldn't survive in outer space, as well as the explosion of the planet, so he left with his spaceship and didn't look back. I grimaced as I got up the ground. The planet didn't have much time left, and the impacts of my fight with Krillin doomed all of the other possible survivors. I put 2 fingers on my head and concentrated. It was quite hard to concentrate with depleted Kai and a fucked up body, but I did it. I disappeared off the doomed planet and appeared on a planet that looked similar to Earth. Everything was red though, earth, sky and trees. The person who I arrived in front of was red too. She had white hair and a voluptuous figure. Her face was pretty, and she asked with a worried face and a cute voice, "Hey, are you okay, mate?" I just collapsed in front of her to conserve energy and fasten my recovery. She took that as an emergency sign. I woke up a bit later in a futuristic-looking house, with a towel on my forehead tucked between some fluffy sheets. I got up from the bed, when the woman entered the room with a tray of food in her hands, and she put it down on the desk, before taking a chair, and propping herself on it, while looking at me with her hands supporting her head and asking now, what I realized to be heavy Australian accent. "So what's your name, big guy? And what's your story?" I didn't know where I was as I hurriedly checked for any kind of Kai and I teleported to the nearest one and I just responded with a simple, "I'm just a traveler that had a bad fight. Could you tell me where I am?" She looked at me with a questioning look in her gaze and answered, "You're on Space Australia, darling. You must get a hard hit on the head." I blinked my eyes at her and asked myself, did Space Australia exist in the Dragon Ball universe? What the hell was this? She looked at me and continued, "Whatever, Mr. Traveler, could you at least tell me your name?" I responded to her. I was grateful she took care of me, and there was no reason to lie her, so I just told her my real name. Not many people knew it in this part of the galaxy anyway. "My name's Krillin, what about yours?" She beamed at my positive response and she answered, "My name's Jaika, nice to meet you, Traveler Krillin." I swear that name seemed familiar. The red skin, white hair. Was this Jaisa's home planet? I shook my head to clear it, and Jaika started to laugh at my action and said, "It seemed you took a hit to your head, you bloke." I started laughing too. It was pretty infectious coming from her. I got up and stood cross-legged on the bed. She got up from her chair and gave me the food she brought. It was an Australian breakfast which consisted of bacon, toast, egg, sausages and fried tomato. I ate it and surprisingly it was very good. She beamed at me as I ate the food. It seemed she enjoyed having people eat her cooking. Then she remembered something, and her smile turned to a frown. I put down the fork and asked her what happened and she replied, "Nothing much, I just remembered when I was young, and cooked for my little bro Jais. Now he is a big shot who can't visit his big sis anymore. He is an officer in a special unit in Lord Frieza's army." It seemed I was right, she was Jais' sister. I nodded my head towards her, and started to comfort her by patting her back. I knew how hard it was to live alone, as after my parents passed away I had no one else in my last life. She started to get up from her low mood and started to smile again. It seemed she was a happy person naturally, and few things would bring her down. She started to ask me about my travels so things wouldn't become awkward and told her about some of my adventures, omitting the fight with Frieza's brother. And she gasped and asked me, "So you truly saved a princess and her planet from the destruction of a guy who wanted to drain it of its life with occult technology?" I nodded my head. It seemed she liked stories. I didn't scan her power level up till now, so I decided to do it now. It wasn't too strong, but not weak either. Her power level reached almost 10,000. It seemed she was kin to talented just like Jais. We took the conversation outside. As I looked around the house I spotted a few framed photos around the wall. Some of them were of the siblings, and some of them were of a middle-aged couple. Hugging each other. The frame was black. I guess it was an homage brought towards the 2 deceased members of the family, and didn't comment on them, and asked while I pointed towards a frame of her, and Jais doing a victory sign, while she held a big animal plush. "So this is your brother?" She nodded and her eyes glazed over. It was obvious she missed him enormously and said, "Yeah, he is Jais. I can't believe there's been already 10 years since that photo was taken." The next day he was enrolled forcefully in Frieza's army due to his high battle power and talent and taken away. She started sobbing. It seemed Jice didn't join Frieza's army willingly. I patted her shoulder. I didn't know what to tell her, so I improvised. Doesn't he get free days, or can't he call home? She brightens up a little at my words and says, well, he calls from time to time from his unit's ship communicator, and I can see he made great friends with this guy Birder, who claims himself the fastest in the universe. She started giggling at the mention of Birder and his antics, or how he has to do strange poses with his captain, saying that they are vital to their team's formation. Here she blown in full laughter. I smiled. It seemed my words took her mind off her loneliness. But she was brought down again and she said, but he can't visit at all. In Frieza's words, the Jinyu special unit doesn't get any free days. They work 364 days a year and they don't get a day off even on Space Christmas. Frieza is a slave worker. At least Jice says the pay is pretty good, and his friends keep off his loneliness. I nodded my head towards her words and asked her, don't you have any friends or another immediate family around to keep you company? She shook her head, but a small smile still appeared on her face as she whistled at a high pitch. Out of nowhere, a black blur came into her arms, and it started barking. It was a strange type of space dog. It looked like a pug, but it wasn't a pug. I couldn't describe its appearance well, but it was pretty cute. She started to pet the dog in her arms and said, this is my friend Chow Chow. He is the only one who likes my company. She seemed sadder when she said those words, and I asked her tactfully, why does no one want to hang around with you? She immediately scoffed at my question and said, it's not because of me, I'm not sure myself. They're just scared to be around me for some reason. It was a strange thing. Why would anyone be scared of her? She seemed nice enough to me. I asked her if we could tour the city and she nodded her head. As made our way along the sidewalk, I sensed and observed the city and its people. It was like more futuristic Earth with people of red skin and white hair. Everyone was pitifully weak compared to Jaika, most not even reaching 100. I think I could understand why most people were scared of her. Her brother was in Frieza's most favored unit, and she was extremely strong. Most people were scared of strong individuals who had any kind of relationships with the Cold Clan. I couldn't help her yet in this regard. There was nothing I could do against the Cold Clan as a whole. I could kill Frieza, but the retaliation from Cold and Cooler wasn't something I wanted to face yet. Frieza was the weakest and youngest of the Cold family. Also, he never trained one day in his life. That's why his power level was relatively very low compared to the others. His brother already had a 5th form, and a power level above 1 billion at 100% of his power. Frieza barely reached 10% of his power at 100%. His 100% was even lower than Cooler's final form while being suppressed a bit. I guess Cooler was just cooler than Frieza. We wandered around the city and people looked with aversion and fear at Jaika, and she seemed even more down than when she talked about it, and we made back our way towards her house. As I observed the city, I realized that her house was in a pretty good neighborhood, and it gave off rich vibes. It seemed Jice would also send money home. We made our way inside, and I thanked her for taking care of me, but she suddenly stopped me by tackling me down and starting to kiss me violently. I was extremely surprised and I pushed her back and stopped her while asking, is this right? Her face was even redder if that was physically possible, and she said, I don't care. I haven't had a man since ever and my body really can't handle it anymore. Please consider this as payback for me helping you. I couldn't argue with her. If this was the payback she wanted to, I took her by the waist and started to kiss her back furiously. Our 18th scene, read at your discretion. Our tongues battled furiously as we started to undress and make our way towards her bed. Her breath was hot and steamy as she became fully naked. I could see her beautiful figure fully. Her breasts were full and round, and her nether parts were inviting as she started to drip on ground. She was really in heat. I took off my guy as well, and my fully sculpted body was all shown to her. She licked her lips and got down on her knees as she started to stroke my member. As it became fully erect, she gasped at the size and looked down, unsure if it could fully fit inside of her. She took my member inside her mouth as she started to move back and forth with her head. Her mouth was hot, and it felt extremely good. My first time with the alien princess was pretty vanilla, with nothing interesting happening besides the normal sex. After a few minutes I climaxed inside her mouth, and she swallowed every drop. She licked her lips, as if to savor the very moment, and she put herself on the bed, her backside facing me as she wiggled her big butt. My little buddy immediately woke up, and became as active, if not more than before. The healing factor gave me incredibly high stamina in every regard. As I thrust myself inside of her, she started moaning intensely. Her nether region started to overflow with her juices and I continued to pound her. She screamed continuously, faster off faster. And so I did become faster. Her eyes became whites only as her pupils were gone in the back of her head, and she was practically overdosing on pleasure. A giant spray of her juices immediately charged out of her, as he laid limp on the bed. It seemed she ended before me. Our 18th scene end. I put her back on the bed, and covered her with some clean sheets. My clothes, unfortunately, got drenched, and since they were quite old anyway, I decided to vaporize them, and get a new outfit. I decided to imitate Goku Black's look, since his outfit was one of the best in the show, in my opinion. I materialized the clothes and looked myself in the mirror. It was a guy similar to Goku's, but in fully black color with some red linings here and there. I nodded to myself. I looked pretty good in it. I made my way outside as to not wake up Chika, and decided to make her some food before she woke up, and I left. There was no reason to remain on the planet. I knew to cook a bit, after all. I had quite a bit of infinite amount of ingredients on my ship. I wasn't a master chef, but I could cook decently in my opinion. I decided to make some special ramen. I doubt this planet ever got to eat something like this since it was future Australia in space. It didn't take me much time and all the needed ingredients were already in the kitchen. I came out of the kitchen with a steaming bowl of ramen and made my way inside the bedroom. Daiko already got up, and she was extremely embarrassed at her sudden outburst as she bowed to me and told me how sorry she was. I just smiled at her and motioned towards her to try the peeping hot bowl of ramen. She never ate something like this before, and she was very curious. I materialized some chopsticks and taught her how to eat with them. She blew a bit on the noodles and put them in her mouth. Her eyes practically became stars as he engulfed the ramen bowl immediately. She almost ate the bowl too. I laughed. It seemed she really liked the food, and so I gave her the recipe. She nodded her head at my instructions, and she suddenly seemed sad again. I asked her what was it about, and she responded, "You will leave, won't you?" I nodded, a solemn expression on my face. I couldn't stop here. I already indulged here a lot by staying here for a few days instead of training. At least Cooler thought I was dead, so he didn't put a bounty on my head or anything like that. I still needed to train if I wanted to dismantle the Cold's Family Planet Trading Organization and put a stop towards their evil ways. She started sniffling as tears appeared on her face. I put my hand on her chin and made her look me straight in the eye and said, "I enjoyed being with you, but there are greater things out there that I have to do. I will, however, make sure your brother Jice comes back to you in time." She nodded and started smiling towards me. Her tears were all gone. She knew I was strong. It was some type of instinct I couldn't describe with words. I made my way outside and popped open my capsule ship, which I changed safely from my other guy before I vaporized it. I got inside and blasted in the random wandering mode. The spaceship blasted off the surface of the planet. Daika was waving at me while shouting, "Goodbye, Mr. Krillin. I won't forget the days we spent together." It was time to intensify my training. My beating from Cooler woke me up a bit. There were still tons of people out there stronger than me. Chapter 20. Intense training in King Kai's job. I turned the gravity up to 1000, while I increased the field around me to 5,000 times. Normal gravity crushed me directly to the floor of the ship, so that I couldn't even get up, even if I wanted to. I laid on the floor like a pancake as the gravity pushed me down. My healing factor was working overtime as my bones were breaking, and healing continuously. I tried to get up, but I just physically couldn't, so I just laid there, while I did some mental training. After a few what I felt like were hours, but were actually not, I could finally get up from the floor. My power level increased to 5,500,000, while my body became way stronger than before, but it still wasn't strong enough to take on Cooler without the Kaken. I stopped the gravity and looked at the watch that would keep up the time of my training, and 4 months had passed. I blinked my eyes. Time around me felt slower than usual under this intense gravity, and I only thought that only a few hours had passed. It seemed after the gravity reached 1000 and above, your sense of time will be distorted. I checked the communicator, but no new messages appeared. It seemed I was alone for the time being. I didn't truly want to continue my training, so I decided to cook something. I decided that I would make some bacon pancakes and a super sandwich, which would consist of beef sausages, bacon and fried eggs, some fries on the sides and tomatoes, pickles and pickled lettuce. After I cooked and ate everything, a voice appeared in my mind. It was King Kai, and he sounded pretty urgent at the moment as he said, "Krillin, there's an emergency in hell. Because of the influx of negative energy due to the death of quite a high amount of villains these days, an abnormally strong demon was created. Even though he is weaker than Devur, no one has the time to deal with it now." A change of pace from training was good for me. I needed to fight more people. I was still too inexperienced. Cooler's spaceship took me by surprise. I didn't fully realize the speed of spaceships that the Cold Empire got their hands on. It was pretty impressive and just a little below mine, which was wished from an almighty magic dragon. I thought theirs would be way slower, but it seemed not. Fortunately, Cooler didn't kill me that day. As long as I wasn't strong enough, I wouldn't start fighting randomly anywhere anymore. I already did a lot of heroic acts. When I wasn't a hero, that was enough for now. Helping a Kai was another thing. I felt bad for King Kai as I took his technique and never gave him anything in return. I even was quite cold to him back then, and even made him embarrassed. I teleported using my instant transmission towards his planet. He was expecting me, and he started to explain the situation better. This demon calls himself Atrox the World Ender. He was created due to the influx of negative thoughts and sin created by the deaths of quite a bit of Avildors. Hell is a special place that takes the sin of Avildors and tries to purify it over time by torturing their residents. This time too many Avildors died, and it made the system overwork itself, letting the sin transform into a new demon. I nodded my head. I was embarrassed at seeing my killing of all those villains created this Aatrox guy, and he was almost as strong as a Super Saiyan 2, if he was just below Dabur. King Kai continued, I don't know anyone else as strong as you that could take on this job in our galaxy, so I need you to slay or seal this Aatrox. Make sure he can't get out of hell into the mortal world, as he would create much chaos. I nodded my head towards King Kai and said, don't sweat it, King Kai. I will do my best to beat him and stop his rampage in hell. King Kai looked visibly better after hearing my answer and said with a straight and serious face, now for you to get to hell you just have to jump down. I knew where hell was, so I just did what I was told to, and I jumped down off the yellow clouds that resembled the flying nimbus. I immediately plummeted to hell, and it was just like I expected it. Lava was flowing everywhere, demons were at large, while some were bathing in lava and others wore warden uniforms, and put the sinners in their place, hitting them with police batons or punching them. It was just like a jail. I could feel immense, an evil Kai coming from the north. The warden demons ignored me as they got the message from King Kai that I was their backup. They couldn't do anything to Aatrox, so they needed me. I flew quickly towards the north, my golden aura encasing me as I met with Aatrox the World Ender. He was a giant monstrosity with red skin and dark horns that extended into the red sky of hell. He had a giant greatsword in his arms as he waved it around, and swatted the warden demons that tried to fight and capture him. He decapitated them, cut them in two, and did all of his best to make sure his victims were in true pain before they died as he laughed maniacally. He looked towards me and shouted, come mortal, as I shall sever your shoulders from your spine, let's fight. There was no talking needed for this guy. I immediately activated my super mode and started to fight with him. To counter his greatsword I made my Kai sword and started to slash at him. He dodged easily and slashed at me at a tricky angle. He was a swordmaster. His slash hit me head on and my arm flew away, but another one grew right after. Aatrox narrowed his red pupilless eyes and said while laughing, ahahaha, you can regenerate. This is great mortal, we can fight at our heart's content then. After I will kill you I will drown the outside world in blood and carnage. I didn't say anything, there was no reason to. He had the skill advantage, and he couldn't kill me directly due to my healing factor. He was a good fighting opponent as I could train my sword techniques on him. We fought for 10 days, and nights. We both had pretty much inexhaustible stamina, me from my healing factor and him because he was on his home ground hell. At first, he dismembered me easily. He parried all my hits and dodged with ease. But the more I fought him the better I got at swordsmanship. I started to parry his shots and dodge myself. Sometimes I would slash, and even cut an arm or leg down. He could regenerate himself just like me. He had a source of boundless sin in hell which he could himself with. After a while I disarmed him of his greatsword. He wasn't as strong as Dabur, he was way below Super Saiyan 2 level. King Kai made a mistake. Everything there was to him was his limitless regeneration stamina and his great sword skills, even though he was a bit stronger than the average Super Saiyan. But King Kai did say there was no one else could beat him in the North Galaxy. It was true as Frieza wouldn't want to do this. He might even kill King Kai fast. Goku didn't mature, yet so there wasn't any true hero of the universe yet. I activated my benevolent Buddha stand and sent a strand of pure Buddha Kai towards Aatrox. It started to burn him as he shouted, mortal, I will kill you and all your loved ones. He motioned for his sword as it flew in his hand, and he was ready to attack me again, but I stopped him as one giant palm from my Buddha stand grabbed him as I started saying a Buddhist chant. Amadeb, go and be reborn Aatrox, be better in your next life. My Kai from the Buddha stand fully enveloped him, and he burned into cinders, transforming into ash and drifting down. His sword was destroyed with him, nothing remained of him, only ash. The wardens of hell who were watching from a distance approached me and bowed. There were all types of demons in hell, but the wardens were mostly horned demons, the higher level of demons. They were the most humanoid of the bunch of demons as well. The captain of the wardens got up and said, send our regards to King Yima when you get out. I nodded my head towards him as one warden showed me the exit of hell. It was a crevice that was going up as a multitude of stairs were inside of it. As I got up the stairs I saw that the final exit was blocked, and I pushed the thing that was blocking it. As I got outside I was surprised to see a giant red man with a beard and horns who wore a purple suit. On his head he wore a helmet that had the kanji for Yama. He opened his book at a certain page and said, Krillin, human born on earth, extremely powerful, status, alive, great good karma. Chance of getting into heaven, guaranteed. I bowed towards King Yama and said, the captain of the wardens down below sends his regards, King Yama. Yama nodded towards my words, and he muttered something about his mahogany table, and how he wanted to see his children, and that Karen was a ruthless bitch. I sweat dropped the image of the great King Yama who judged, as souls go to hell or heaven dropped a bit in my mind. I took my leave and decided to report to King Kai as well, before I took my leave back to the mortal realm. I teleported towards King Kai's planet, and told him what happened. He nodded his head happily, and his whiskers moved in a certain pattern. He called out loud, Gregory, Bubbles, Krillin did it, it's time for celebration. Out of his house came a monkey and a big bug. They all started dancing in a happy mood, and invited me to share lunch with them. I accepted after fighting 10 days with the World Annihilator demon. I was a bit hungry after I ate. I bid my goodbyes towards the trio and teleported back towards my ship. I made sure to hide it on an abandoned asteroid to make sure no one got their hands on it. There were still 3 more years before I would go back to Earth, so I just continued to train. 6 more months gone by and my power level increased to almost 7 million. I was sure that by now I could handle Cooler, but it wasn't the time yet. I needed to thoroughly annihilate him and his family. Well, Frieza would be a piece of cake now. I didn't know how strong King Cold was. In the anime he was killed by Trunks, while he was in his second form only. But this universe that I was in was quite a bit different than what I truly remembered. Goku was stronger in this universe than in the original, when he started his journey. I realized this wasn't the original Dragon Ball universe. I was wrong. I didn't question how strong Cooler was as I didn't truly know who Cooler is. From what I observed of him, he should be Frieza's sibling. Frieza talked a bit about his family when he fought on Namek, but didn't mention a brother. I thought that he only had a father, but it seems I was wrong. As everything was different than the original, I wasn't sure if the events would play normally either. Up until now it was the same, but what if? I shook my head. What would come would come. I just needed to be prepared for it, and the best preparation was higher strength. I still had 2.5 years left before it was time to come back to Earth. I promised them that I would come back, and I couldn't truly break my promise to my closest family and friends. I continued to train under high gravity, while simulating the fight with Cooler again, seeing what I could have done better, and what I have done wrong. And I could say, I did everything wrong. I wasn't prepared for Cooler to appear, and he did quite a big number on me. I would have died a nameless grave on that planet, if it wasn't for my healing factor and Cooler underestimating me. I realized that I was still too immature. Knowledge and mental strength didn't mean wisdom. I was still acting dumbly. Maybe I shouldn't have had sex with Jaisa's sister either. Even though she was in heat, it was wrong for me to take advantage of her. She wasn't thinking straight. I gave her hope, and took it from her. When I left, leaving her on a planet that feared her whole being. Maybe I wasn't such a good person I thought I was. Having sex with that princess was a different thing. It was more of a political thing. Her father insisted on it as well, and their culture was different from Earth's. Space Australia was Australia but in space. Maybe I just took her sex for granted. In my last life, I didn't have many sexual encounters and most were paid for. Not one of them were emotionally involved. Maybe Jack lied to me. I wasn't sure of it. Maybe she was just lonely and wanted someone to live with her. Maybe that was her way of expressing her wish of me staying with her on a planet that rejected her. I bumped my head into the ship's hard metal walls. Women were troublesome. I couldn't get them at all, and I just realized I might not get with 18 either. This universe was too different. I wasn't sure what her personality would be. Guru and Popo were the same. New people I didn't know of popped everywhere. This was kind of frustrating. Everything was going on all nice up till now. I guess I should think twice when a hot alien lady throws herself in my arms and says fuck me. Whatever I promised Jaika, I would get Jais to come back to Space Australia, and I will do it. There was still a lot of time till the Namek saga, so I could train enough. I was still human in the end. I wasn't sure of many things and I could make mistakes, so I got up from my sulky mood and continued my training. I would make it up for Jaika in the future. 18 was still an unknown factor. I will try to live a little more till I meet her. I continued my training and 6 more months gone by. 2 more years till Raditz came. My power level was nearing 9 million, and I couldn't improve my sword skills anymore, as I had no sparring partners. I could now fully fuse my super mode with Godspeed, and the full power technique without much strain. I still couldn't use it with Kaken consistently though. I drifted in space as my spaceship was going around in random patterns. The spaceship speed was unrivaled, and it could get from galaxy to galaxy in months. I was currently in the West Galaxy. I was just touring the galaxy. Nothing big was happening currently. Everything was peaceful. Even though the Cold Empire monopolized most of the universe, they didn't truly rule all of it. I made my way around different planets, and fought different martial arts masters, lowering my power level to match theirs to sharpen my skills. I fought different kind of races, that used different type of martial arts that matched their body types. Some had liquid bodies, some gaseous bodies. Some had forearms and focused on strength, some focused on defense, while other could redirect your attack with their body's force alone. Some martial arts weren't learnable due to the different physiques, but I could get some insights that would refine my skill from them. As I wandered the universe and beat a bit of the baddie here and there, nothing else major happened. My power level didn't increase by a lot, as I focused on refining my skills, and I reached the power level of 10 million. There was only half a year left before Raditz was supposed to arrive on Earth, and somehow I found myself in the North Galaxy. I didn't control the direction the spaceship flew in, so I randomly found myself in different galaxies every time I finished one of my training sessions. I took some fruit yogurt out of the spaceship's fridge, and ate it after a long training session. Cold yogurt was especially delicious. There wasn't much to do anymore till Raditz came, so I decided to wander the North Galaxy basically on foot. I put the spaceship in its capsule form, pocketed it, and started to fly around in space. I didn't fly randomly, but more near star clusters that had Kai's signatures. Even though I journeyed through a bunch of galaxies, I didn't visit every planet. I visited planets ranging from bug people to elves that had magical civilization, and even monsters who were in the Stone Ages. Seeing such different communities, and how other races lived their lives, brought a qualitative change towards my mind and soul. It was also made me realize that I wasn't the most sociable guy ever, and that I didn't show as much emotion as I was supposed to. I didn't know what to think about that realization. I was just different. As I wandered the North Galaxy in the continuity of my spiritual journey, I found a habituated desert planet. This planet was special as its inhabitants believed in Buddhism. There were Buddhist statues everywhere, and everyone wore monk robes as they meditated. There were temples everywhere on the planet. I sat down under a Buddha statue and started to think, was Buddha an actual god in the Dragon Ball universe as well? He never appeared in the anime, even in Super where gods were appearing everywhere. There was a plaque under the Buddha statue that read in common language, Buddha exists in one heart. It's hard to cut off all ties to earthly needs to ascend to nirvana. If you can't do it, that's not the only way. Buddha is benevolent and gives many ways. Find your way inside your heart. Don't follow the words of others, as they would murk your mind and way. Follow yourself and you will be enlightened. I contemplated the words, but this mantra was so profound that even my soul couldn't understand it thoroughly. It was a different type of technique that I couldn't understand yet. It took me 2 months to wander around the galaxy, and 2 more months I just stood here to understand the mantra. There were only 2 months left before Raditz came to Earth. I wasn't in a hurry. Goku would be able to beat him in a jiffy. I decided to continue my wandering around the universe. I made sure to stir off the cold family planets. I didn't need to meet Frieza yet. I didn't know those men were coolers, and who cooler truly was till it was too late. Now things could be avoidable. I wasn't sure if Frieza was stronger than the original, so I didn't want to meet him yet. Wandering around the universe, to see its wonders was beautiful. This was my holiday before the Android saga would come. 2 more months went by, and it was time to go back to Earth. Wandering Universe 7 was interesting. It helped me calm myself both spiritually and physically. After I realized how much of a jerk I was, I put 2 fingers on my forehead and concentrated. It was time to go back home. I found Kami's energy and teleported. I was back on the lookout. Chapter 21, Poor Raditz, and Earth's changes. I stood on the white porcelain tiles of the lookout, and breathed in the cold air of the high altitude of the lookout. Mr. Popo was looking at me like a hawk would look at a hare, but he didn't dare to take action. He realized he couldn't see through me anymore at all. It was like I was a black hole with no end. Kami came from outside the palace, and looked at me with wonder in his eyes as he exclaimed, "Your adventure in the outer space changed you a lot, young Krillin. It seems there's a different aura about you. Your sin also seems to have become non-existent." It seemed when Kami first met me he found a little aura of evil around me. I guess the dark aura from before could be explained from this. I nodded towards Kami, and told him a few of my adventures, before I left towards Capsule Corporation. As I extended my Kai senses to envelop all of the planets, I rose my eyebrows in contemplation and surprise. It seemed the general power level of the planet increased from 5 to 10 to 25 and 50. The moral level of the planet increased by quite a lot for some reason. I flew towards the Capsule Corporation building, and rang the bell. Out of the building came Bulma's mother, and she ushered me in, recognizing me as one of Bulma's friends. Bulma met with me, and started to tell me about the changes that happened during the 4 years I was away. Your invention truly increased the popularity of martial arts, you know. These people are naturally competitive, and when they saw how could they count their power in numbers, and see how truly strong they were, a lot of them started to train and compare with each other. I nodded my head. It was human nature to want better things, better jobs, better lives, and now to be physically better than one another. It was a normal thing. The spark that created this phenomenon was the scouters I gave them. I asked her about the gravity chamber and ship, and she smiled. It seemed she could make it, albeit it couldn't go beyond 20 times from what she told me. I got outside and looked towards the gravity chamber installed in the courtyard. It was occupied by quite a bit of people. It was Tien, Chaozu, Rashi, Yamcha, Goku, and even Kai was inside. Outside of the chamber I could see a little kid waiting. He had a red, yellow, and green gown and a hat with the 4-star Dragon Ball on his head. It was Gohan. I approached him, and made sure my face was in the most cordial expression it could do, and asked him, "Who's this little guy here?" Gohan was startled as he didn't sense my approach, but he calmed down as he saw me coming in with Bulma. He bowed towards me and said, "My name's Gohan, mister." So polite, just like in the anime. It seemed even though Kai wanted to train as well in this timeline, she didn't make Gohan train yet. Out of the chamber came out all of my friends, and they all started to smile when they saw me chatting with Gohan. Goku and Rashi came forward and gave me a big hug, while the others nodded at me. I could sense their power level increased by quite a lot with the help of the gravity chamber. Goku's was already at 11,000, Rashi's was at 8,000, Chiaotzu at 5,000, Yamcha at 6,000, and Tien at 7,500. They all grew stronger, and I could see that they could use the Kaken up to ×3, albeit with damage to their bodies. Hell, even Kai reached almost 2,000. I took a better look at Bulma, and her power level was around 600 as well. It seemed everyone trained after I left. I asked Goku about Gohan, and he told me that it was his son as he continued. This little guy here, I don't know what to say. I can feel quite the high amount of power locked in him, but Kai told me that we would have to wait a few more years so that it wouldn't stunt his growth. I nodded my head. Kai's worries were unfounded, but it was normal for a human with no knowledge of Saiyan biology to think like that. They all wanted for us to go to Kame House and make a huge party as my welcome back gift. I smiled towards them and said, "You guys go ahead. I have something to do in the city and I will come back to Kame House shortly." I made sure to check on my bank account before I left the city, and my mouth hanged open at the number. It was so high that I could feed Beerus till he became fatter than his brother and still live a life of comfort after for 10,000 years. It seemed people liked the Scouters so much they bought them en masse. Some of them even crushed them with their palms and acted in a chuny way to make themselves look baddest in front of others, like, "Oh, look at that guy's power, it's so high." Crack crunch, and they destroyed their Scouters and bought new ones. This increased the Scouters' sales by 300%. I decided to buy a house in the city, so I could have my base on Earth. I didn't need to live with that perverted old man, and I could visit him whenever I wanted. The house came with furnishing and everything else that was needed. It was a bit near Capsule Corporation, so it was quite expensive, but it was practically a drop in the ocean for my account. I decided to fly towards Kame House. There was no rush, and I could let them prepare the party better. After a few minutes of flying, I reached Kame House, and everyone had party hats on, and a giant cake was there. Everyone was here, Launch, Oolong, and Pure included. Even Piccolo was here. He looked at me with a begrudging expression like he didn't want to be here, but Goku put an arm above his shoulders and dragged him into the party. Outside the atmosphere, a white sphere-shaped spaceship was making its way towards the Earth, its inhabitant not knowing what was going to happen to him after he landed on this planet. His spaceship landed in a nearby farm's land plot and made a giant crater. A fat middle-aged man who was working nearby took his trusty shotgun from the back of his truck and made his way to see what happened. A tall stranger with a big mane of unruly hair made his way out of the spaceship and clucked his tongue as he pressed the green scouter that presided over his left eye. "Ding ding ding," the man gasped and said. "The average power level of this planet increased by more than 5. Are the reports wrong?" As he tried to scan for the highest power level, the man with the shotgun made his way nearby and said, "What are you doing on my land? I'm gonna shoot, get the hell out." But the stranger ignored him and he shot at him. Unfortunately for the poor farmer, Raditz redirected the bullet and it shot him in the stomach, his life and death unknown. Raditz clicked on the scouter again as he started to search for the highest power level on the planet, and he gasped as the number of 11,000 appeared on his scouter, and he muttered under his voice, "Is this damn thing broken? It can't be. This power level is almost nearing Prince Vegeta's. It's even above Nappa's. Maybe the scouter is broken, and it's 1,100. He started flying quickly towards the coordinates of the power and he reached Kame House. We were all in the middle of the party, so the stranger that came out of nowhere kinda killed our boss. Everyone looked with narrowed eyes as they sensed the power level of the stranger around them. I knew who he was, and I shook my head. Poor thing, he was as strong as in the original. Is this the curse of Raditz? Even in an alternate universe, he can be stronger than 1,000 power level. He flew down, landed on the island and chuckled, while looking towards Goku and saying, "So Kakarot, you didn't do your mission, huh?" Goku muttered to himself and told Raditz, "So Kakarot was my original name. Well, whatever, now I'm Goku and I grew up here on Earth, so it doesn't matter if I had to exterminate this planet's inhabitant or not." Goku still remembered that. When I taught him the fake moon technique, I also gave him tidbits of Saiyan history, so he knew what the mission was about. Raditz sneered and said, "You grew pretty strong on this backward planet, even being a bit stronger than myself, but you are still not even able to touch Nappa's or the prince's shoes. It would be better if you and your friends would just give up this planet." Goku was ready to show Raditz how wrong he was, but Kai interrupted him and said, "Darling, it's just a weakling. Why don't I handle him and let you do whatever you want with him later, since it seems he's of your race?" Goku nodded and said, "Okay then Kai, all the training you did with us made you quite strong, so you can handle this guy easily." Raditz sneered at their words, and he was ready to attack, but Kai appeared in front of him and sent a roundhouse kick towards his chest. Raditz didn't even see how she did it. She was practically a blur to his eyes since her power level was double his and he had no techniques. He was a low-class Saiyan who didn't have access to the fake moon technique, so he couldn't even turn his error if he wanted to. It was in the middle of the day, so there was no chance for a comeback. Kai beat the snot out of Raditz. His armor cracked, his scouter broken. He couldn't even call for backup, nor anyone could hear anything else besides initial conversation that happened between us. He lay down on the sand, his tail twitching and his wild mane of hair full of sand. He started to cry and beg. "Kakarot, I'm your big brother, please take your woman off me. She is a devil, please. Stop her. I'm going to be good, I'm going to join you, just stop her." It seemed Kai gave Raditz PTSD already. Goku motioned with his hand and Kai stopped abusing Raditz's body and he asked him, "So you are my brother? What about the rest of the family? I'm not sure about what happened to our race, but I heard we are pretty much extinct." Raditz got up from the ground hastily as he trembled from the pain and his injuries while he explained, Well brother, our home planet was supposedly hit by an asteroid, and only very few of us survived, the ones who were sent on missions at the time. The only confirmed alive Saiyans are Yumi the Prince and the Imperial Advisor Nappa. Goku nodded his head. He finally found some of his original family and he seemed he didn't want to kill Raditz. He could be redeemed just like Piccolo was, and he was sure he could keep him in check with his higher power level, even if he decided to train him. I was there anyway, and I didn't show my true power level yet to everyone else. All they could feel was minimum energy from me, so they didn't ask. Goku gave Raditz a senzu bean, and he ate it not knowing what it was supposed to do, but after all of the damage he took from Kai healed up, and his power level increased by 300, he started to flatter Goku and said, "Wow brother, you have such magical things, they're way better than the healing chambers of the Frieza Force." Bulma perked up at the mention of healing chambers and dragged Raditz towards her, so he could explain to him what it was all about. After hearing about the wonders of the chambers, Bulma immediately started to draw some schematics basically out of God knows where. Raditz was scared of Kai and the others as he realized that the scouter didn't malfunction. Outside of the planet and the Milky Way galaxy in far away place, a short guy with a blue and white armor who wore white gloves on his hands and had a red scouter, stood on the body of an insect humanoid as he ate his remains. Nearby a buff bald man with a mustache, and no armor wearing only underwear, was sunbathing while also eating some bug remains as he said, "Hey Vegeta, it seemed Raditz's connection with his scouter was cut out, should we go after him?" Vegeta sneered and said, "Let's see where that fool lost his connection on." Oh? Planet Earth, wasn't Raditz supposed to get his little brother from there? Do you think his brother became stronger and beat him to the ground? Nappa chuckled and said, "The probability of that happening is quite high, isn't that right Vegeta?" Vegeta chuckled and said, "Yeah alright, that buffin could have gotten his ass beat from his little brother from what we know about him. Let's go to Earth and recruit this Kakarot since the father Raditz is probably dead." Raditz suddenly sneezed on Earth as he was handed a piece of the giant cake. Pure told him bless you and Raditz nodded his head at the little cat. He had a feeling like someone was cursing him. I observed Raditz thoroughly to make sure he had no other intentions, but it seemed he was cowed by the power levels that were way above his. Even Piccolo's reached almost 6,000 and he didn't even train in the gravity chamber due to his stubbornness from what I heard. I guess that's why Kami had such a ruddy complexion when I met him. Now that Raditz has been cowed with no action on my part, it was time for some relaxation for me till Nappa and Vegeta came 2 years later. I could even make a dojo on this planet and spread my techniques so I could increase its mortal level. It could make Beerus happy and give him no reason to even think of destroying the planet. Beerus spared the planet in the original because of Goku, but I think he spared it more because he was a glutton who loved Earth's food. It was time to make a dojo and spread my techniques on this planet. Maybe I would try to do it in the whole universe. In the future we would be excluded out of the chance of being erased if our mortal level was high enough. Chapter 21. Poor Raditz and Earth's changes. I stood on the white porcelain tiles of the lookout and breathed in the cold air of the high altitude of the lookout. Mr. Popo was looking at me like a hawk would look at a hare, but he didn't dare to take action. He realized he couldn't see Troph me anymore at all. It was like I was a black hole with no end. Kami came from outside the palace and looked at me with wonder in his eyes as he exclaimed, "Your adventure in the outer space changed you a lot, young Krillin. It seems there's a different aura about you. Your sin also seems to have become non-existent." It seemed when Kami first met me he found a little aura of evil around me. I guess the dark aura from before could be explained from this. I nodded towards Kami and told him a few of my adventures before I left towards Capsule Corporation. As I extended my Kai senses to envelop all of the planets, I rose my eyebrows in contemplation and surprise. It seemed the general power level of the planet increased from 5 to 10 to 25 and 50. The mortal level of the planet increased by quite a lot for some reason. I flew towards the Capsule Corporation building and rang the bell. Out of the building came Bulma's mother, and she ushered me in, recognizing me as one of Bulma's friends. Bulma met with me and started to tell me about the changes that happened during the 4 years I was away. Your invention truly increased the popularity of martial arts, you know. These people are naturally competitive, and when they saw how could they count their power in numbers and see how truly strong they were, a lot of them started to train and compare with each other. I nodded my head. It was human nature to want better things, better jobs, better lives, and now to be physically better than one another. It was a normal thing. The spark that created this phenomenon was the scouters I gave them. I asked her about the gravity chamber and ship and she smiled. It seemed she could make it, albeit it couldn't go beyond 20 times from what she told me. I got outside and looked towards the gravity chamber installed in the courtyard. It was occupied by quite a bit of people. It was Tien, Chaozu, Rashi, Yamcha, Goku, and even Kai was inside. Outside of the chamber I could see a little kid waiting. He had a red, yellow, and green gown, and a hat with the 4-star Dragon Ball on his head. It was Gohan. I approached him and made sure my face was in the most cordial expression it could do and asked him, "Who's this little guy here?" Gohan was startled as he didn't sense my approach, but he calmed down as he saw me coming in with Bulma. He bowed towards me and said, "My name's Gohan, mister." So polite, just like in the anime. It seemed even though Kai wanted to train as well in this timeline, she didn't make Gohan train yet. Out of the chamber came out all of my friends, and they all started to smile when they saw me chatting with Gohan. Goku and Roshi came forward and gave me a big hug, while the others nodded at me. I could sense their power level increase by quite a lot with the help of the gravity chamber. Goku's was already at 11,000, Roshi's was at 8,000, Chiaotzu at 5,000, Yamcha at 6,000 and Tien at 7,500. They all grew stronger, and I could see that they could use the Kaken up to ×3, albeit with damage to their bodies. Hell, even Kai reached almost 2,000. I took a better look at Bulma, and her power level was around 600 as well. It seemed everyone trained after I left. I asked Goku about Gohan, and he told me that it was his son. As he continued, "This little guy here, I don't know what to say. I can feel quite the high amount of power locked in him, but Kai told me that we would have to wait a few more years so that it wouldn't stunt his growth." I nodded my head. Kai's worries were unfounded, but it was normal for a human with no knowledge of Saiyan biology to think like that. They all wanted for us to go to Kame House and make a huge party as my welcome back gift. I smiled towards them and said, "You guys go ahead. I have something to do in the city and I will come back to Kame House shortly." I made sure to check on my bank account before I left the city, and my mouth hanged open at the number. It was so high that I could feed Beerus till he became fatter than his brother, and still live a life of comfort after for 10,000 years. It seemed people liked the Scouters so much they bought them en masse. Some of them even crushed them with their palms and acted in a chuny way to make themselves look badass in front of others, like, "Oh, look at that guy's power, it's so high." Crack crunch, and they destroyed their Scouters and bought new ones. This increased the Scouters' sales by 300%. I decided to buy a house in the city so I could have my base on Earth. I didn't need to live with that perverted old man, and I could visit him whenever I wanted. The house came with furnishing and everything else that was needed. It was a bit near Capsule Corporation, so it was quite expensive, but it was practically a drop in the ocean for my account. I decided to fly towards Kame House. There was no rush, and I could let them prepare the party better. After a few minutes of flying, I reached Kame House, and everyone had party hats on, and a giant cake was there. Everyone was here, Launch, Oolong and Pure included. Even Piccolo was here. He looked at me with a begrudging expression like he didn't want to be here, but Goku put an arm above his shoulders and dragged him into the party. Outside the atmosphere, a white sphere-shaped spaceship was making its way towards the Earth, its inhabitant not knowing what was going to happen to him after he landed on this planet. His spaceship landed in a nearby farm's land plot and made a giant crater. A fat middle-aged man who was working nearby took his trusty shotgun from the back of his truck and made his way to see what happened. A tall stranger with a big mane of unruly hair made his way out of the spaceship and clucked his tongue as he pressed the green scouter that presided over his left eye. "Ding ding ding," the man gasped and said. "The average power level of this planet increased by more than 5. Are the reports wrong?" As he tried to scan for the highest power level, the man with the shotgun made his way nearby and said, "What are you doing on my land?" "I'm gonna shoot, get the hell out." But the stranger ignored him, and he shot at him. Unfortunately for the poor farmer, Raditz redirected the bullet, and it shot him in the stomach, his life and death unknown. Raditz clicked on the scouter again as he started to search for the highest power level on the planet, and he gasped as the number of 11,000 appeared on his scouter, and he muttered under his voice, "Is this damn thing broken? It can't be. This power level is almost nearing Prince Vegeta's. It's even above Nappa's. Maybe the scouter is broken and it's 1,100. He started flying quickly towards the coordinates of the power, and he reached Kame House. We were all in the middle of the party, so the stranger that came out of nowhere kinda killed our buzz. Everyone looked with narrowed eyes as they sensed the power level of the stranger around them. I knew who he was, and I shook my head. Poor thing, he was as strong as in the original. Is this the curse of Raditz? Even in an alternate universe, he can be stronger than 1,000 power level. He flew down, landed on the island and chuckled, while looking towards Goku and saying, "So Kakarot, you didn't do your mission, huh?" Goku muttered to himself and told Raditz. "So Kakarot was my original name. Well, whatever, now I'm Goku and I grew up here on Earth, so it doesn't matter if I had to exterminate this planet's inhabitant or not." Goku still remembered that. When I taught him the fake moon technique, I also gave him tidbits of Saiyan history, so he knew what the mission was about. Raditz sneered and said, "You grew pretty strong on this backward planet, even being a bit stronger than myself, but you are still not even able to touch Nappa's or the prince's shoes. It would be better if you and your friends would just give up this planet." Goku was ready to show Raditz how wrong he was, but Kai interrupted him and said, "Darling, it's just a weakling. Why don't I handle him and let you do whatever you want with him later, since it seems he is of your race?" Goku nodded and said, "Okay then Kai, all the training you did with us made you quite strong, so you can handle this guy easily." Raditz sneered at their words and he was ready to attack, but Kai appeared in front of him and sent a roundhouse kick towards his chest. Raditz didn't even see how she did it. She was practically a blur to his eyes, since her power level was double his, and he had no techniques. He was a low-class Saiyan who didn't have access to the fake moon technique, so he couldn't even turn his air if he wanted to. It was in the middle of the day, so there was no chance for a comeback. Kai beat the snot out of Raditz. His armor cracked, his scouter broken. He couldn't even call for backup, nor anyone could hear anything else besides initial conversation that happened between us. He lay down on the sand, his tail twitching and his wild mane of hair full of sand. He started to cry and beg. Kakarot, I'm your big brother, please take your woman off me. She is a devil, please. Stop her. I'm going to be good, I'm going to join you, just stop her. It seemed Kai gave Raditz PTSD already. Goku motioned with his hand and Kai stopped abusing Raditz's body and he asked him, so you are my brother? What about the rest of the family? I'm not sure about what happened to our race, but I heard we are pretty much extinct. Raditz got up from the ground hastily as he trembled from the pain and his injuries while he explained. Well brother, our home planet was supposedly hit by an asteroid, and only very few of us survived, the ones who were sent on missions at the time. The only confirmed alive Saiyans are Yumi the Prince and the Imperial Advisor Nappa. Goku nodded his head. He finally found some of his original family and he seemed he didn't want to kill Raditz. He could be redeemed just like Piccolo was, and he was sure he could keep him in check with his higher power level, even if he decided to train him. I was there anyway, and I didn't show my true power level yet to everyone else. All they could feel was minimum energy from me, so they didn't ask. Goku gave Raditz a senzu bean, and he ate it not knowing what it was supposed to do, but after all of the damage he took from Kai healed up, and his power level increased by 300, he started to flatter Goku and said, wow brother, you have such magical things, they are way better than the healing chambers of the Frieza Force. Bulma perked up at the mention of healing chambers and dragged Raditz towards her, so he could explain to him what it was all about. After hearing about the wonders of the chambers, Bulma immediately started to draw some schematics basically out of God knows where. Raditz was scared of Kai and the others as he realized that the scouter didn't malfunction. Outside of the planet and the Milky Way galaxy in far away place, a short guy with a blue and white armor who wore white gloves on his hands and had a red scouter stood on the body of an insect humanoid as he ate his remains. Nearby, a buff bald man with a mustache and no armor, wearing only underwear, was sunbathing while also eating some bug remains as he said, "Hey Vegeta, it seemed Raditz's connection with his scouter was cut out. Should we go after him?" Vegeta sneered and said, "Let's see where that fool lost his connection on." Oh, planet Earth. Wasn't Raditz supposed to get his little brother from there? Do you think his brother became stronger and beat him to the ground? Nappa chuckled and said, "The probability of that happening is quite high, isn't that right, Vegeta?" Vegeta chuckled and said, "Yeah, alright, that buffin could have gotten his ass beat from his little brother from what we know about him. Let's go to Earth and recruit this Kakarot since the father Raditz is probably dead." Raditz suddenly sneezed on Earth as he was handed a piece of the giant cake. Pure told him bless you and Raditz nodded his head at the little cat. He had a feeling like someone was cursing him. I observed Raditz thoroughly to make sure he had no other intentions, but it seemed he was cowed by the power levels that were way above his. Even Piccolo's reached almost 6,000 and he didn't even train in the gravity chamber due to his stubbornness from what I heard. I guess that's why Kami had such a ruddy complexion when I met him. Now that Raditz has been cowed with no action on my part, it was time for some relaxation for me till Nappa and Vegeta came 2 years later. I could even make a dojo on this planet and spread my techniques, so I could increase its mortal level. It could make Beerus happy, and give him no reason to even think of destroying the planet. Beerus spared the planet in the original because of Goku, but I think he spared it more because he was a glutton who loved Earth's food. It was time to make a dojo and spread my techniques on this planet. Maybe I would try to do it in the whole universe. In the future we would be excluded out of the chance of being erased if our mortal level was high enough. Chapter 22. Creating a dojo and getting disciples. After the party ended, and everyone made their way back to their own homes, I decided that I would put my plans in motion. I bought a large plot of land near the city, and used my money to create a huge dojo with all of the normal training equipment, and something extra that I created using my materialization skill. It took no more than 3 days to finish everything, and I even added ads on television, on billboards everywhere. When people heard that an ex-Budokai Tenkaichi World Tournament winner opened up his dojo, and they could learn from him, all of them came towards it like a moth would be drawn towards a flame. There were thousands of people waiting outside the dojo, clamoring and pushing each other wanting to enter. I made my way outside. Behind me was Raditz. He would be an instructor in the dojo. He had to earn his bread somewhere. He couldn't be lazy. He could teach people normal Kai techniques and how to fly. It was good enough for these humans who thought that flying was a myth and they could never do it with their bodies. I officially opened up the dojo and everyone entered. It was much more spacious than what the outside would indicate. It was full of training machines, weighted clothing that could be used and taken away if they had a subscription, and special new healing chambers supplied by Capsule Corporation. Bulma wanted to test out the healing chambers at my dojo. I already knew of their effectiveness, so I agreed. We also had gravity machines, but those would be for later. Many people came from around the world to train in my dojo. There was even that Indian guy from before who got beaten up during the first Budokai tournament we joined. His name was Nam. I motioned towards him and he bowed. His power level increased to 100, and it seemed he knew how to use Kai, but not that well. I could make him my second instructor after I trained him a bit. I told him a special mantra to train his body and mind and put him on his way. I told him to report to me his progress every day. I got up on a podium specially made for this occasion and sat cross-legged on a pillow up on the podium. Everyone looked at me strangely, but I coughed a bit and said, "From here I will teach you a special mantra that you will all train in diligently every day, so you would become stronger. You will be able to train your body. Will you chant this mantra at the same time to increase your training speed? But not everyone will be able to endure it. I will say it only once, so remember it well." As I started to impart the mantra, everyone took a serious look in their eyes as they started to decipher it. Not everyone was talented in martial arts, but some people could recall the whole mantra from the first time they heard it. These people with friends who didn't understand it from the first time would explain it so everyone could train with it. It seemed this batch of people weren't greedy and wanted their friends to grow with them, instead of letting them down. I nodded my head. This was a good mentality for the humans to have. I left letting Raditz take care of the menial questions while I entered in deep meditation in my room. I learned how to refine my Kai and increase its quality with mediation, while also purifying it into a higher being of Kai. It was pure gold and gave a soothing feeling. It was just like my Buddha stand transformed Kai, but pure and truer. Right now not even 1% of all my Kai was transformed, and it would take me years and years of purifying it to reach perfection. But I could feel that it would bring a qualitative change to my whole body and spirit when it would be done. After a round of meditation, I decided to leave the dojo. I lent Raditz the keys so he could close up when it was time, and gave him his first month's pay in advance. He had to pay for his meals while he stayed with Goku. I decided that next day I will have to inform everyone of the next threat, that was the two Saiyans. Raditz didn't say they would come. I guess he thought there was nothing of importance on Earth that would warrant their attention. But them thinking that Raditz was dead, they would surely want to put their hands on one of the last remaining Saiyans that was stronger than Raditz, which was Goku. I got everyone to make their way towards Kami's lookout and told them with a serious look on my face. 2 years from now 2 more Saiyans will come, and they are way stronger than Raditz. One can be beaten by all of you, while the other would need you to give your best to beat him. I wouldn't interfere in the fightings, so I decided for Goku to train in a special place. Well, you will up your training here with Mr. Popo. Mr. Popo as his summon came out of nowhere and shouted, "Now it's time for another bout of training." Everyone shivered, Goku included, but I grabbed his shoulder and put 2 fingers to my forehead. King Kai did need a second student, and some humanoid company now and then. I could teach him the Kaiken, but where was the fun in that? I left Goku with King Kai after I explained everything to him. King Kai smiled towards me with a proud look on his face and said, "I got lots of favor and praise from Supreme Kai. The other Kais were very jealous. They all thought Atrox would escape into the mortal realm, but your timely intervention granted me lots of faces. I could do you this favor and teach this lad here the Kaiken and Spirit Bomb." I nodded my head at King Kai, and left them with their own devices, while I teleported myself back on the lookout and said, "I will supervise your training with Mr. Popo for a while, but now I want you to tell me if you mastered the techniques that I taught you last time." Jiaosu immediately sprung his hand up and said, "Krillin, I can already lift the whole lookout with my mind. If I want to, I took all the training you told me to do seriously." I looked towards the little guy, and Jiaosu immediately made the lookout fly higher and higher in the sky. We were almost out of the stratosphere. I motioned towards him, and he put the lookout back down. Even though his power level wasn't high, his mental powers were impressive. Tian's third eye started glowing as his power level multiplied by 5 times, but he immediately gave up using it. It took too much of a burden on his Kai and body. To increase his power level by 5 times, he could use the Kaiken up to 3 times maximum with his current power level. So obviously he couldn't increase it to 5 times with his racial skill. A blurry image appeared behind Tian after that. It looked like a green triangle with a single eye in it. I didn't recognize it at first as it was too blurry, but when I took a better look, it was the Illuminati symbol. His power level would increase to 8 times when he truly mastered this technique. Yamcha came up as well. I already knew about the Kaiken, so I wanted him to show me his stand. The blurry wolfman image with a star between his eyes appeared behind Yamcha, but it stopped almost immediately as he started to huff. He was weaker than Tian, and it seems he didn't put his all in training his stand either. I nodded my head towards them and said, "From now on you will train to become twice as strong as Goku, and master your stands. I also want you to be able to reach at least Kaiken times 5, and Tian, you should be able to use your racial skill perfectly." They all nodded their heads at me as Raditz approached me as well, and asked me what did I want from him. I smiled and told him, "For you, I can teach you the fake moon technique. Vegeta knows it already, doesn't he?" Raditz gasped at my knowledge and asked me, "How do you know about Vegeta and the fake moon technique?" I told him how I realized it by how he called him Prince, and how the higher echelons of the Saiyans could get their hands on the technique. I also told him how I learned it from some scattered remnants in space while I was traveling. I added spotted thinking that I found pieces of planet Vegeta flying in space. I let them all experience Popo's training once again, but now intensified and improved. They also had to concentrate on mastering their techniques as well. I left for King Kai's planet as I forgot to ask Goku about his progress on the Ikari mode. Goku was already wearing King Kai's special weighted guy, while he was in the forms of starting the training for the Kakin. He smiled towards me his silly goofy smile and asked why I was back so soon. I just got straight to the subject. How's your progress on the fake moon technique? Goku smirked and showed me his hand as he put Kai in his hand. A little white ball came out of his hand. I nodded my head towards his showcase of the technique, and he dispelled it. How about the other technique? Goku's smile turned into an awkward one, and he scratched the back of his head and said, "Oh well, you see I couldn't truly master it. I could make a great ape image appear behind my back, but the power level didn't increase as much as 10. I need to practice it more." I made him show me how he initiated the technique, and I found quite a bit of flaws on how he executed it, and pointed them out to him. His power level increased to 6 times. After he fixed all his mistakes, it seemed his comprehension didn't reach the needed realm to touch upon the Ikari mode yet. While Goku was a genius, he wasn't much compared to Broly. But Broly was a freak of nature who had more plot armor than 10 Gokus combined. I bid farewell to them afterward, and made my way back to the dojo as I let only Nam man it today, and he needed me to be there as well. I needed at least 2 competent instructors in the dojo. Something clicked. Kai could be an instructor here as well. It solves their money problem, and with her higher power level, her cooking prowess increased by quite a lot. She could whip up food extremely fast from what Raditz told me some days ago. I flew towards her, and Goku's house on Mount Paozu, and she opened up the door. Gohan was behind her. He had a bunch of cookies in his hands, and he ate them like a chipmunk. His puffed up face was pretty cute. I immediately cut the chit-chat and told her about my proposition. She started to ponder on it for some time before she agreed. She asked me about everything: retirement plan, salary, if I gave out good health insurance. I dropped at the questions, but answered all of them truthfully. She seemed she liked my answers as she wanted to start teaching at the dojo straight away. She said that she wanted to take Gohan with her to the job, and I agreed. He would start training next year as well, so it mattered if he started to get exposed to martial arts directly earlier. He was one of the characters with the strongest potentials, just below Frieza and Broly's. My power level also increased to 10,500,000. I also stabilized the combination of my techniques, and I could use the super mode with my full power technique Godspeed and Kakin, up to ×3 with a bit of effort. While my power level didn't increase by much, my techniques got a bit more refined during my stay on Earth. I could feel the Kai of every inhabitant of the planet increase daily by small numbers. Slowly and surely the planet was getting stronger as a whole. Kai was internal and not breathed in from the universe. Planets would benefit if the population was strong. The planets would get infused with Kai from the population, as the environment would grow stronger and more hospitable for intelligent life forms. Right now the damage that was done to Earth due to pollution and irresponsible wars was slowly but surely getting reverted. Earth as a whole was getting stronger every day, itself as well as its inhabitants. Chapter 23. Mental training in a mental domain. After feeling the changes all around the planet, I could surely say that I was getting in the right direction with everything, considering Earth's well-being. Maybe I should let all of the Saiyans know the truth about their planet when they would reunite with each other. I would make sure Vegeta and Nappa knew their place. Yes, Saiyans were battle-thirsty warmongers who did kill the truffles to take their planet. But their potential was extremely great and they could be redeemed. Vegeta became the kind of a loving father in Dragon Ball Super, and he cleansed away all his prior sins by saving the universe with Goku a couple of times. Nappa was a blank slate for me. I knew jack shit of the guy. He was big, mean and ruthless from what I saw from the anime. When he fought the Z fighters, he disarmed Tien and wanted to kill Gohan. If it wasn't for Piccolo's interference at the end, Gohan would have become space dust. There were only 6 more months left before Nappa and Vegeta landed on Earth. Somewhere in the galaxy 2 pods were flying near each other. Out of one of them came the voice of Nappa, who asked continuously, "Vegeta, are we there yet?" Vegeta responded, "No." And it went so on so forth till they would reach Earth. I think both of them would be convinced, just like Raditz. Goku should already have reached the power level of 40,000 by now, and he should be able to use the Kakin well enough anyway. Even the human Z fighters would be able to beat them by now. Mr. Popo's training was scarcely effective for some reason on them. I think even Chiaotzu would be able to transform Nappa into a pancake on the ground with his mental power by now. He might not be able to beat Vegeta with it, but Nappa would be a goner. I could feel their powers increasing every day as they trained. They even mastered their stance, but they still couldn't combine them with the Kakin. Their bodies were too frail, even though Popo whipped them into shape by torturing them. I mean training them thoroughly every day without rest. He even mass-fed them senzu beans, which now were in abundance due to Yajirobe not stuffing his face full of them every 10 seconds. Korin also told me when I last visited that the more beans there were, the faster the newly planted ones would grow. He said that the old ones' magical waves would influence the newly planted ones and accelerate their growth. I decided before the 6 months were up to thoroughly train my mental power in magic, as I kind of let them down these years in favor of training my Kai in martial arts. I continuously trained my mental power until something clicked inside of me. I could now create a mental domain inside my soul, in which I could fight imaginary opponents to perfect my techniques. It wouldn't increase my power level, but here I could train as I would in the hyperbolic time chamber, even though the increase wasn't as high as 1 year into 1 day. It was 10 days in 1 day. It was practically the perfect technique training place. I decided to enter into closed-door training. For the time being, I let the dojo in the hands of Kai and Nam. Nam, now having the power level of 250, he learned how to fly and project his aura, becoming a middle-graded instructor, while Kai was my best one with Raditz. But Raditz was also training on the lookout with the others. He mastered the fake moon technique, and could barely control himself in his grade 8 form. His power level even increased to 7,000. I sat cross-legged on my bed in my new house in North City. A few blocks away I could even see Bulma's house. Clearing my mind thoroughly, I started to stop all distracting thoughts and enter into a limbo state. Nor live nor dead. My breathing became so slow my heartbeat was almost nil, but if you would put your hand on my chest you would still feel a weak bump. I entered my mindscape, and there was nothing there. As I just unlocked it, nothing appeared in it till I willed it. The best way to train your techniques is in the battlefield, so I decided to create one. All around me countless dead bodies appeared, some impaled, some decapitated or eviscerated. Flags appeared around some of the bodies depicting a red and black symbol with words that read in a special runic tongue that meant Noxus. Out of the pile of bodies a giant of a man with an axe as big as him appeared. He had an iron jaw and a furnace embedded in his stomach. He was bald, and he wore armor. His skin was sickly grey like an undead as he shouted with a low voice, "Charge for Noxus." He started to bum rush me, just like a bull would do. A red aura started to encase him due to his speed, and he became a blur. His charge was linear, so I easily dodged it. I created this mindscape to train my mind in magic, so I didn't try to fight the giant head-on. I created a barrier around him with my magic and stopped his charge. The barrier started to shake, and it almost broke as cracks appeared around it, but it held fast. The giant started to roar as sound waves appeared out of his mouth which destroyed the barrier completely. A red aura encased him like a shield as he took his axe and slammed it into the ground. The giant shockwave traveled towards me, and I used my magic to negate the damage by defusing the shockwave. I created a small invisible barrier around me which stopped all of the remaining shockwaves. After that I used my magic before the giant could continue harassing me with any other attack. I stopped all of his movement with special magic chains, and ran him through with a magically blessed Kai spear. Magic was a support technique that could enhance the power of Kai. I could even create symbols that I could use to give a burst of power towards other people. I could even heal them like a senzu being would do, albeit it wouldn't truly restore all of their stamina. Magic had tons of possibilities. As I pondered, the giant stopped struggling and died, but suddenly his furnace on his stomach started to grow to life. His eyes became fully red as he shouted, destroyed his bindings and rushed towards me. I dodged his attempts of him trying to grab my throat and sap me of my vitality with his hands. It seemed his death gave him the ability to lifesteal and increase his speed by quite a bit. After a few seconds, he decomposed and became a pile of ash. Without any vitality, being still in the furnace couldn't keep him alive. The dog tag was within the ashes that read, "Sion." Everything disappeared as this one session of training was done. By the outside time 3 days passed, which meant 30 days passed inside the mindscape. I could now control my magic better, and my mind strengthened itself by quite a bit as well. Only 3 days passed, and there was still quite a lot of time before the Saiyans came so I could continue my training. I appeared somewhere else now. It was a rural planet I visited once in the South Galaxy. It had a medieval Asian feel. Some lanterns with 4 red lines were hung around the trees and houses. Out of nowhere, a sniper shot was directed towards my forehead. I dodged it by moving my head a few centimeters to the right. It was a special magic enchanted bullet. As it skewered a person behind me, the illusion of flowers appeared as his brain matter eyeballs, and everything else was incinerated. The bullet was made so well it gained great penetrative force. It also added the illusion to add a great execution towards its target. Out of a nearby tree, a masked man who wore an outfit made from snakeskin steel boots and a steel arm guard held his sniper rifle as he took aim again and said, "Dance puppet. We shall make a great show." His aim was impeccable, but with my magic, I could stop the bullets from midair. He looked shocked at my capabilities and started to run. While his figure was frail, his speed was extremely quick. I started to follow him, but I stepped on something that looked to be a lotus trap. It caught my leg, but I immediately destroyed it by putting a bit of pressure on it. The man tried to aim at me again, but when he saw that his trap did nothing, he started to run away again. This man gave me quite a good idea of how to use my magic, so I created a Kai rifle and infused it with magic. I took aim at his back and shot him with a magically enhanced bullet. It was enhanced for speed, only so it hit him in the back and he fell. I made my way towards him, and took off his mask, but nothing appeared under it. It was blank. I swear I saw some eyeballs. When he aimed at me back then, everything around dissolved around me. I was back in my blank mindscape. 7 more days had passed us. 10 days passed outside, and 60 inside the mindscape. Time flowed differently even though it felt like I fought for minutes. In real time outside, it was 1 day. I willed myself to get out of the mindscape, and I was outside again. Closed-door training was a success. All of my bodily functions regained their normal parameters as I got outside my house to smell the air outside. It felt like there was a qualitative change towards my magic comprehension. Only very few people knew how to use magic properly in this world, but with the help of my mindscape and some memories from the past life, I could create more unique ways to use magic. Kai guns enchanted by magic would look cool, but weren't useful in this world. But I could enchant the beams to give them special properties. Combined with elemental Kai, I could even challenge people with higher power levels than me now. As everyone continued training, it was almost 2 more months till the Saiyans came, but out of outer space earlier than intended came 2 rotund spaceships. Out of one sounded, "Vegeta, are we there yet?" The other voice just sighed and answered in an annoyed fashion. "Yes, we are here, Nappa." Both crashed into one of the cities, and Nappa said, "Sweet, Vegeta, time to find the Kakarot, shall we?" I immediately teleported near them and said, "Gentlemen, I will take you to Kakarot immediately, but you are scaring the normal population. If you will stop, it would be appreciated." My towering figure, dark clothes, and gold ore made a strange combination in both of their eyes. They couldn't sense Kai, so Nappa decided to use his scouter, which immediately exploded when it pointed at me. Nappa started to stutter immediately. Great Earth Protector, we are here for someone of our race, and Vegeta growled at Nappa and said, "Stop making an ass out of yourself, Nappa. Even if he is strong, you don't need to embarrass us. It seems he means no ill will, and he knows where Kakarot is." I nodded towards Vegeta. As always, the prince was pretty smart and knew his place. That's how he survived for so many years in the Frieza Force. Then only later, when he inflated himself with the thought that he became the legendary Super Saiyan, he started acting dumbly. If he acted like that from the start, he would have become space dust at Frieza's hand on the first day of work. I motioned towards a nearby wasteland and made them wait there. It was time for the Z fighters to meet the Saiyans. I made sure to get Goku from King Kai planets too. After a few minutes, everyone was gathered up. We made our way towards the wasteland. The group included Tien, Yamcha, Raditz, Goku, Roshi, Chiaotzu. Everyone was at its best. Tien reached a power level of 22,000, Yamcha a power level of 18,000, and Roshi a power level of 25,000. I taught him the stand technique, and he made a turtle stand that increased his power level by 9 times. He was way more experienced due to his old age, and he could create the stand faster than the others. Goku's power level breached 50,000, and Raditz reached 11,000 when Vegeta pointed his scouter at Raditz and saw 11,000. He clicked it again to make sure it was right. When he reached Goku, he had the longest face you could see around. When he noticed Goku still had his tail too, he knew he couldn't beat him, so he scoffed and said, "We are here to take Kakarot back with us due to Frieza's orders. Since Raditz is alive too, he needs to come with us too." I interjected and said, "No, I don't think they will." Vegeta gritted his teeth. He knew he could do nothing here, and he hated the feeling of being powerless. His power level was just around 18,000 and Appa's was almost around 6,000. Even in their grade 8 forms, they wouldn't be able to defeat Goku as he could transform as well. I broke the silence and said, "Do you guys really know why your planet was destroyed?" Vegeta and Nappa scoffed and said, "An asteroid hit it. We already know. Why would you bring this up?" I chuckled at their words and said, "Wrong. Where did you hear this information?" Nappa said while suddenly realizing, "Lord Frieza told us, but goddammit, that lizard Mutherficker did it. An asteroid hit it, my ass." Nappa immediately started cursing Frieza. Vegeta turned his scouter off the moment he saw Nappa's expression. That was his cursing expression. I nodded my head. They both realized who destroyed their planet. They weren't that dumb. I gave them something to strive for right now. We have special training areas and techniques here on Earth. As long as you don't do anything to the planet or its inhabitants, you can try to train here with Goku and Raditz. Raditz already accepted. Vegeta's pride was high, and he didn't want the help of some Earthlings, but Nappa's pride wasn't that high, so he immediately accepted. Vegeta is the only one left out, accepted as well with gritted teeth. I took all of them to the lookout, so they could train there. Gravity chambers already upgraded up to 100 times there. Bulma was waiting there with the chambers and healing pods. Mr. Popo glared at her. She invaded the sanctity of his lookout. He was ready to devour her, but we suddenly all appeared due to my instant transmission. Mr. Popo immediately hinged his jaw back on, and he showed his normal smile. Bulma unknowingly didn't realize what Popo was about to do behind her back. When her eyes laid on Vegeta, he immediately got towards him with basically what I could say, be hearts in her eyes. Vegeta scoffed at the Earthling woman, but she wasn't truly a weakling. He could see he was stronger than an average normal Frieza soldier. Frieza cannon fodder soldiers' power levels were around 100 to 500. The prince didn't know how to smile, so he didn't reciprocate her greeting. He just sneered and asked me about the special training. I told him about the gravity chambers and who their creator was. I indicated to him that he should talk to Bulma for a better experience. His eyes also narrowed when he saw the healing pods. He wasn't sure how we got our hands on technology like Frieza's. That guy was supposed to have a monopoly on it. Suddenly out of outer space a voice appeared in my head. It wasn't King Kai, it was Super Kamiguru. Earthling, you used our Dragon Balls, and I unlocked your potential. It's time for you to repay us. Super Kamiguru decreed so. I swear I would have helped them anyway, even if he didn't say that. It seemed Frieza still heard about the rumors of the Dragon Balls and he tried his hand to take them. In the original, the rumors got confirmed by Vegeta due to the leak of the bugged scouters. But now, even though he didn't get a confirmation, his thirst for immortality made him take a bit out of his time to take a trip to Namek. Super Kamiguru continued in my head. I sense a great evil will make its way towards Namek in a few months. Take your ass, and whoever else asses out here, and save the goddamn planet. After that the connection was cut off. Guru seemed a bit pissed off there, didn't he? On Namek, Guru was observing a bird as he shouted outside. Nail, I saw a bird outside. Nail sighed and said, yes Lord Super Kamiguru. Guru continued, it was pretty. Nail just said yes again. An evil smile suddenly appeared on Guru's face as he said in a low tone, go and kick his ass. I informed the others of Namek's plight of help, and everyone wanted to help. Vegeta and Nappa didn't truly want to, but I told them I will take the gravity chambers and healing pods with me to Namek, so they agreed to come in the end. They didn't know Frieza was on its way there. I made sure not to tell them, it would be a surprise. I was in for a surprise myself too. In Frieza's spaceship, Frieza was in his levitating chair as he made his way to Namek. Suddenly another spaceship similar to his flew towards his spaceship and Cooler made his way inside. Cooler started grinning and said, chasing after Urban Legend's little brother. Frieza scoffed, an annoyed expression appearing on his face. He truly hated his big brother of his with passion. What do you want, Cooler? It's not the time for the family yearly reunion, is it? Cooler just chuckled and said, oh no, I just wanted to follow you on your Urban Legends chase. Maybe if these things existed we could both become immortal. Frieza wanted Cooler to be the last person who gained immortality, but he couldn't say no, as a finger was already pointed to his head, a purple death beam ready to shoot Trough. And Cooler coldly continued without a hint of mercy or familial love. And I wasn't asking for your opinion on it, little bro. Cooler was just too cool for Frieza. Chapter 24. Buffing everyone up before Frieza. We all teleported on Namek with the use of my instant transmission. I even invited Piccolo by telling him we were going to his home planet. As we made our way around the Namekian villages we met with Nail at Guru's house. Piccolo nodded at Nail and Nail nodded at Piccolo. The Namekian body language was extremely simple, especially with people of the warrior clan. Piccolo was happy to be on his home planet. He split off our group and went sightseeing it. We installed the training rooms near Guru's house as I materialized a platform that could sustain everything. It was time for some hardcore training. I wouldn't interfere with Frieza, I will let them fight with him. Frieza was just too weak, and all of them needed some life and death fights to stimulate their potential. If they were almost near death I would save them, but there was a very low chance for that to happen, at least against Frieza that is. I turned the gravity up to 100 and made everyone come in. They immediately sagged down like a bunch of potato sacks. They couldn't move properly at all, the gravity was too much for them, Goku included. He trained to the maximum of 20 times gravity before. Nappa and Vegeta were in the other chamber training at 30 times. After they got used to it, I will make them train with all of us here. I let their bodies get used to gravity, and use my magic healing to heal their bones and muscles, facilitating an increase in power level to Goku, and letting the humans get used to gravity better. I also helped Nappa and Vegeta out with my healing magic, and after that put them directly inside 100 gravity. Both of their power levels increased every time they healed from damages that were Saiyans. The damage wasn't life-threatening though, so the increase wasn't very high. But they could train in 100 times gravity normally now. I decided to take a page out of Popo's training book and said, alright Magus, it's time for some special fighting training. You will all come at me with everything you got, and try to move me from my spot. My power level already touched 12 million, and all of them were below 100,000. It was practically impossible to do that without any techniques. They all charged towards me in a formation trying to disorientate me. It was quite cute. It would have worked on anyone else with a weaker mind or Kai that was above 1 million power level, so they could have put a good fight against second form Frieza. I let loose my Kai as I extended my arms, pushing them back. They tried to attack me again. It was obvious they had a hard time as they were sweating intensely. The gravity was taking a toll on their bodies, but I could feel their Kai increasing. I could not heal exhaustion, but I could heal their torn muscles and broken bones. I continued to train them as a general from hell, and after 2 months of hellish training great results have been sprung. The Saiyans as always were the most impressive of the bunch. Goku reached the power level of 130,000, Vegeta reached the power level of 90,000, Nappa the power level of 70,000, Roshi's power level increased to 50,000, Tien's to 45,000, Yamcha's to 40,000, Raditz to 35,000 and Chiaotzu's to 20,000. Piccolo also came back and joined us in the training, reaching a power level of 49,000. It seemed his journey among his people made him want to protect the planet against the evil that was to come. He trained like crazy, and his motivation made everyone else train like crazy as well. My power level didn't increase by much, but teaching others makes you reflect upon oneself, so my techniques improved by quite a bit. I was sure I would even be able to take Cooler out now if we fought again. Vegeta was grumbling. He didn't like taking what was he thinking was charity from me and the others. He could have trained on his own, but he realized that his power level wouldn't have spiked so much just by sparring with Nappa on a godforsaken planet. He also didn't like how the low-class clown Kakarot surpassed him in power. He was a prince, the super elite. After he learned how to sense Kai, he immediately challenged Goku to a fight. Kakarot, I'll show you what a true Saiyan elite can do. Goku smirked and said, I'm pumped for a fight with my fellow Saiyan as well, Vegeta. Vegeta scoffed but didn't continue talking. He immediately started to charge his purple Kai as it started to shake the whole planet. Nail was watching, and Super Kami Guru had his window open, so he could spectate as well. He was eating popcorn while saying, Nail, get me more butter. Nail looked at Super Kami Guru with a puzzled look. What are you eating, Lord Guru? Don't you remember that we can only drink water? And what's this butter you are talking about? Guru kept a straight face and said, about that drinking only water thing, it was a lie. We can eat as well. Why do you think I'm so fat? And so started the epic adventure of Nail's search for butter, so Super Kami Guru could fully delectate himself with the creamy popcorn while watching sparring sessions. Back to the fight, Goku charged up his sky blue aura as well, and started to clash with Vegeta. Their speeds were so fast the majority couldn't see them fight without using Kai to enhance their eyes. I could see them normally. They were trading punches and kicks, and Goku was always coming up as better in the exchange. It seemed Goku was going easy on Vegeta. As the fight continued, Vegeta realized that Goku was holding back and he shouted, Kakarot, stop humiliating me by holding back. Give it your all. And Goku did so. He suddenly appeared in front of Vegeta, grabbed him by a leg, and started spinning him around. After a while of spinning, he let go of his leg, and used the Kaikin to immediately appear at the destination Vegeta would have landed. He appeared under him and punched him in the back, grabbed him and threw him down in the water. I immediately took Vegeta back out of the water and healed him. When did Goku become so brutal? Vegeta started to cough up a bit of water as he felt his power level increasing. He reached 120,000. He was ready to fight with Goku again, but he remembered how his power spiked due to the Kaikin and he settled down. This was his loss. Nappa immediately got towards Vegeta and held him up. Vegeta scoffed and declined Nappa's hand by smacking it away. Nappa just grinned like a buffon and said, Vegeta, you got your ass handed to you today. It was almost like seeing you mock fight with Frieza back then. Vegeta's face darkened, and he pointed two fingers towards Nappa. Nappa's face paled as he found himself with two tiny holes in his chest. Vegeta intentionally didn't aim at any vital areas and said, this is for speaking when you were out of line, Imperial Advisor Nappa. Nappa coughed some blood and chuckled. I'll make sure to ask for your permission before speaking again, Prince. Vegeta laughed and said, make sure to not make the same mistake again, understood? Nappa just nodded his bald head vigorously. I came near him and healed both of the holes in his chest, his power level spiking towards 75,000. Goku motioned towards me with a smile on his face. It seemed he wanted to show me something. Out of the corner of my eye I could see Bulma patting Vegeta on the back and consoling him. Vegeta seemed pretty grim, but didn't refuse her pats. I followed Goku and entered the gravity chamber with him. Immediately his eyes turned feral and his power grew. His power level multiplied by 10 times, and an Azera image appeared behind him for a brief second. His smile turned wider as he waited for my comments. Good job, Goku. It seems you have mastered the Ikari mode. Now you can use the power of the grade 8 form without the cumbersome increased body size. Goku nodded his head and he reverted his transformation. It's all due to your teachings, Krillin. You are so knowledgeable about this kind of stuff. Where did you even learn all of it? I chuckled and answered him truthfully. Well, for one, I got some of my knowledge from my travels around the universe, and the other, well, I used the Dragon Balls to gather some needed information. Goku nodded his head. He wouldn't question anything that was involved with the Dragon Balls. He witnessed their prowess firsthand. After 20 more days I could feel giant malevolent Kai, and a smaller malevolent Kai approaching Namek. It seemed Cooler decided to butt in Frieza's gig this time around. I took everyone, and entered Guru's house and said, Great Super Kami Guru, could you unlock everyone's potential, so we would have a better chance to ward off the invaders? Super Kami Guru looked at us through his almost closed eyes and said, the one with the hippie troll hair and the bald one with the mustache gets no potential unlocked. Vegeta growled and said, we didn't need your so-called potential unlock anyway. Nappa, let's wait outside. Nappa complied with Vegeta's wishes and walked outside with him, waiting for the others to get their potential unlocked. Jiaosu's power level increased to 70,000, Yamcha's to 120,000, Tian's to 170,000, Goku's to 1,500,000, Raditz to 200,000, and Roshi's to 180,000. Vegeta growled outside as he sensed the new power levels. He was already at 150,000, while Nappa's breached 95,000. Everyone was ready for the incoming fight with the two tyrant Frost Lords. Frieza's giant spaceship entered the planet's atmosphere, while coolers waited outside of it. They landed and the grunts made their way outside the spaceship ready to unleash hell upon Namek's peaceful land. Unfortunately for them, we all made our way towards the spaceship, and the grunts became space dust. Out of the spaceship Frieza, Cooler, Dodoria, and Zarbon flew out. Cooler narrowed his eyes at my presence, while Frieza looked puzzledly at Cooler then at me and asked, "Do you know this bald noseless thing, brother?" Cooler gritted his teeth and said, "He is the one who injured me back then." Frieza gasped. He remembered how he made fun of Cooler some years ago, because he came at the family reunion battered, and took a beating from him because of that. Frieza knew there was no chance of interfering in my and Cooler's fight, so he glanced at the others, and when he saw Vegeta he started smiling menacingly. "So this is where you head, Vegeta, you rat. It seemed my benevolence didn't stop you from trying to usurp me." Vegeta spat on the ground and growled. "Benevolence? What benevolence? Killing my entire race and destroying my planet. That's what you call benevolence, Frieza?" Frieza chuckled and said while seemingly reminiscing, "Oh yes, those fireworks were quite sublime. Planet Vegeta made a great show before it became space dust." Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz gritted their teeth in anger. Goku looked sullenly towards Frieza as well, even though he didn't know anything concrete about his race. Besides that they were space pirates, he still felt bad about their fate. I intercepted Cooler as I used 5 of my 6 dots, increasing my power level to 384 million. Cooler immediately powered up at his maximum in his normal form, and we took the fight out of Namek's atmosphere. On the planet, Frieza remained and said, "Dodoria, Zarbon, you stay back. Their power levels are too high for you. Call the Ginyu Force for reinforcements. I still need some grunts to gather the Dragon Balls after." Goku looked sullenly at Frieza as he started to charge his Kamehameha. Frieza immediately powered up towards his second form, and charged forward. Vegeta was ready to kill both Dodoria and Zarbon. But before they both died at Vegeta's hands, they could still use their scouters to call for the Ginyu Force. Vegeta laughed and said, "Killing Frieza's minions and his Ginyu Force will feel pretty well." Frieza growled towards Goku as he transformed in his third form, and Goku used Kakin ×2 to fight against him. In the atmosphere of planet Namek, I was confronting Cooler for the second time, and this time around I wasn't going to be the one who lost. Well, that is it for now. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below #ZXC. See you later.